is to provide you with truth, transparency, and
threat to America and our forces stationed overseas. The regime already had missiles capable of hitting Europe and our bases, both local and overseas, and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America. The purpose of this fast-growing missile program was to shield their nuclear weapon development and make it extraordinarily difficult for anyone to stop them from making these highly forbidden by us nuclear weapons. We were the ones that were complaining. We were the ones that wanted it stopped. But everybody was behind us. They just didn't have the courage to say so. An Iranian regime armed with long-range missiles and nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat to the Middle East, but also to the American people. Our country itself would be under threat, and it was very nearly under threat. I was very proud to have knocked out the Iran nuclear deal by President Barack Hussein Obama. That was a horrible, horrible, dangerous document. They would have had nuclear weapons 3 years ago, and they would have used them. But I'll not let that happen. For almost 47 years, this regime has been attacking the United States and killing Americans. Every time you see someone with missing arms and legs or a face that's been absolutely shattered violently, it was almost certainly caused by an Iran roadside bomb. They were put there by General Soleimani, who was the father of the roadside bomb. Very proudly, he thought, but I terminated him in my first term. This was our last best chance to strike what we're doing right now and eliminate the intolerable threats posed by this sick and sinister regime. And they are indeed sick and sinister. Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their Navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. A nuclear weapon. Never going to have a nuclear weapon. I said that from the beginning. They're never going to have a nuclear weapon. They were on the road to getting one legitimately through a deal that was signed foolishly by our country. And finally, we're ensuring that the Iranian regime cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside of their borders. And we thought we had it. Today, we grieve for the 4 heroic American service members who have been killed in action and send our love and support to their families. In their memory, we continue this mission with ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the threat, this terrorist regime, military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it. Whatever somebody said today, they said, oh, well, if the president wants to do it really quickly. After that, he'll get bored. I don't get bored. There's nothing boring about this. Do you agree with that, Pete? I don't think there's anything, Mr. General. I think there's nothing boring about it. Somebody said from the media, I think he'll get bored after about a week or two. No, we don't get bored. I never get bored. If I got bored, I wouldn't be standing here right now. I guarantee you that, to go through what I had to go through. We also projected 4 weeks to terminate the military leadership, and that was done in about an hour. So we're ahead of schedule there by a lot. But please join me in thanking every American service member who bravely is standing in harm's way. They really are incredible, and I just want to thank you. We have a lot of them right here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
He was speaking at the beginning of a Medal of Honor ceremony at the White House. He began that event with those remarks and then moved on to honoring those service members there. So we also have this from an official with the State Department today saying Secretary Rubio and the State Department is urging Americans to depart now from the countries below using commercial transportation due to serious safety risks. Americans who need State Department assistance arranging to depart via commercial means should call 24/7, enroll in to get the latest security updates from the nearest U.S. embassy or.
As soon as a student takes the assessment, the teacher can go into their dashboard, find some resources.
On social media, as he says, to all American citizens in the Middle East, your safety and security is our #1 priority. Let's listen.
At the Department of State, our #1 priority is the safety and the security of American citizens everywhere in the world. Now, with what's going on in the Middle East with Operation Epic Fury and the cowardly attacks that we're seeing from Iran against Gulf countries, I wanted to take this chance to speak directly to Americans who are in the Middle East about the work we are doing to try to keep you safe. So immediately following the beginning of this operation, at my direction, the State Department activated a 24/7 task force serving personnel and resources necessary to help provide American citizens with up-to-the-minute safety and security information. Now, in order to receive these updates from the nearest U.S. embassy or consulate, you have to register with the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. You have to register with STEP, and here's where you do it. You go to step.state.gov. That's step.state.gov and register so we can reach you. We also encourage Americans abroad to follow our security updates for U.S. citizens channel on WhatsApp and follow @TravelGov on social media as well. The latest alerts are also available on travel.state.gov. That's our website, travel.state.gov. Finally, Americans in the Middle East, you can reach the Department of State 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the following phone number: 1-202-501-4444. That's 1-202-501-4444.
That was Secretary Rubio with that short video posted on social media earlier today, urging Americans in the Middle East to get out. We're also watching live right now. This is a live look in Lebanon at Beirut, just one of the places in the Middle East this Tuesday morning there that is now seeing more military activity in Beirut. This is the latest information we have on what's happening in there. Israeli airstrikes hitting Lebanon. The Israeli military saying it was targeting Hezbollah command centers and weapons storage facilities there in Beirut. Hezbollah also said it launched drones targeting an Israeli airbase, which the Israeli military says it downed 2 of those drones. We've also heard reports of explosions being heard in Tehran today. Also, the Iranian state TV this morning saying that the country has launched an attack on an airbase in Bahrain. So a lot of activity happening as it's now Tuesday morning there in the Middle East. We're continuing to track the very latest, bringing you updates as they come into our newsroom. Let's take a 2-minute break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. We're taking a live look right now at Beirut, Lebanon. Israeli airstrikes hitting in there as it's now Tuesday morning in the Middle East. The Israeli military says it was targeting Hezbollah command centers and weapons storage facilities there in Beirut. We're also hearing reports of explosions in Tehran, Iran's capital. Iran also saying on state TV today that it has attacked an airbase in Bahrain. So a lot of activity happening as it's now Tuesday morning there in the Middle East. We want to bring you also the latest numbers out of these strikes, the latest death tolls for all of these countries involved. So this is what we have so far. In Iran, more than 550 people have been killed since the U.S. and Israeli airstrikes began. That number is according to the Iranian Red Crescent Society. It's a non-government humanitarian organization. As far as the U.S. military announcing today that 2 previously unaccounted for service members have been confirmed dead, bringing the total to 6 American casualties and 18 wounded. All 6 were Army soldiers and part of the same logistics unit in Kuwait, according to a U.S. official. In Israel, where several locations were hit by Iranian missiles, 11 people have been confirmed killed. In Lebanon, Israel's retaliatory strikes against Hezbollah killed dozens of people, and we're seeing a new strike, as you can see there in Beirut, happening just in the last hour or so. In other Gulf nations also being affected, 3 people reported killed in the United Arab Emirates, also 1 in Kuwait and 1 in Bahrain. So that's the latest death toll count as it's being reported right now. And of course, that number could continue to rise. We're going to bring you the very latest as we learn more out of the Middle East. Dozens of U.S. aircrafts took part in that opening attack against Iran Saturday morning. This came as President Trump said the U.S. had a ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the terror threat that was posed by Iran, calling the current action a last best chance to strike and eliminate intolerable threats by a sick and sinister regime. Fox Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin has more.
As dawn crept up across the Central Command AOR, the skies surged to life.
More than 100 U.S. warplanes launched simultaneously from land and sea. Refueling tankers, electronic attack bombers, and unmanned drones flew toward Iran in a synchronized wave. 4 B-2 bombers made a 37-hour round trip from their base in Missouri to drop dozens 2,000-pound bombs on underground missile sites, and overnight B-1 bombers carrying 75,000 pounds of munitions flew 34 hours round trip from their bases in South Dakota. In just 48 hours, the U.S. and Israel achieved air superiority, taking out all of Iran's Russian and Chinese air defense systems.
This air superiority will not only enhance the protection of our forces, but also allow them to continue the work over Iran.
CENTCOM says it sank 11 of Iran's Navy vessels, part of its goal to destroy Iran's Navy. It may take weeks to eliminate Iran's missile stockpiles and mobile missile launchers. But in eliminating key parts of the regime, the mission is ahead of schedule, according to President Trump.
We also projected 4 weeks to terminate the military leadership, and as you know, that was done in about an hour, so we're ahead of schedule there by a lot.
3 U.S. F-15 fighter jets were shot down overnight in a friendly fire incident when Kuwaiti air defense systems mistakenly fired on them. 6 American pilots evacuated and are now safe.
This was our last best chance to strike what we're doing right now and eliminate the intolerable threats posed by this sick and sinister regime. Our objectives are clear.
This is not Iraq. This is not endless. Our generation knows better, and so does this president. He called the last 20 years of nation-building wars dumb.
This work is just beginning and will continue.
Secretary Hegseth said this is not a regime change operation, which begs the question, what happens if the Iranians are left with the remnants of the past regime? He and the president both have not ruled out putting boots on the ground. General Kane said today more forces are on their way to the Middle East. In Washington, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
And the global oil and gas market already starting to see the consequences of this regional conflict in the Middle East. Oil prices leaping today, which will likely mean higher prices soon at the gas pump. This is all based on worries that the widening war in the Middle East could slow the global flow of crude oil. But as Fox Business correspondent Lauren Simonetti tells us, there's one country in particular that will feel these consequences.
Analysts are closely watching the Strait of Hormuz, which accounts for almost 30% of global oil transit. Iran has threatened to close the strait amid the ongoing conflict with the U.S.
It's something that we're very focused on militarily. So we're talking about a real kind of choke point out there.
Experts say the United States, now the world's leading oil producer, will not be heavily impacted as it has achieved record production.
We can produce it here safer and more reliably than any other place in the world. And that has provided President Trump a tremendous amount of foreign policy flexibility.
But problems in the strait would affect China. Beijing bought more than 80% of Iran's oil exports in 2025, leading China's foreign minister to call for an immediate ceasefire.
China has diversified supplies, so it gets a lot from Russia. But remember, it's also lost its Venezuelan oil. You will see real problems in about 2 months in China if this situation continues.
President Trump has been vague about a timeline when it comes to Iran.
We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that.
Trump is scheduled to meet with President Xi in China at the end of the month.
There's a number of things that could happen in the next weeks that could very well derail that meeting in Beijing.
Higher oil prices would put upward pressure on inflation, which could keep the Federal Reserve from cutting interest rates. In New York, Lauren Simonetti, Fox Business.
And we are continuing to follow the latest out of the Middle East. We'll bring you those developments live as they happen here on Live Now from Fox. Let's take a 2-minute break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Shauna Kalafi. New alerts coming out of the Middle East right now. This was posted by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, on X, saying the IDF is currently conducting simultaneous targeted strikes against military targets in Tehran and Beirut. we actually did see some of those explosions and that smoke. This is a live look right now at Beirut, as the IDF now saying it is conducting strikes both there in Lebanon and in Tehran right now. We heard explosions being reported also in Tehran. So now the IDF saying that they are responsible for both of those strikes, conducting targeted simultaneous strikes right now in Iran as well as Lebanon. We will continue to watch this, bring you the very latest as we get it. And we also want to take you to a appearance by First Lady Melania Trump earlier today. She was presiding over the UN Security Council's meeting. I want to play out those opening remarks for you, where she expressed her heartfelt condolences to the families of our lost heroes who sacrificed their lives for freedom. We know today, based on the latest numbers, 6 American casualties, 18 wounded in these operations and strikes against Iran. Let's play out Melania Trump speaking at the UN Security Council.
Good afternoon. The 10,113 meeting of the Security Council is called to order. I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute on behalf of the Council to the delegation of the United Kingdom for its service as President of the Council for the month of February. I'm sure I speak for all members of the Council in expressing deep appreciation to the entire United Kingdom team for the great diplomatic skill
It's the Mega Mattress Sale at Slumberland.
Save big on a Sealy mattress, just $4.99.
Get a Sealy Posturepedic Plus.
Get up to $300 in Slumberland cash.
Get 60-month financing on Tempur-Pedic and Stearns & Foster.
Only at Slumberland.
It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the Secretary General, I want to thank you for your leadership in organizing today's discussion. This debate comes at a moment of exceptional relevance. Today, we face the highest number of armed conflicts since the Second World War. The number of civilians killed in these conflicts is the highest in decades. Our reality is clear. When conflicts erupt, children are among those most severely affected. We have been reminded of this truth over the last 2 days. Schools in Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Oman have closed and moved to remote learning owing to the ongoing military operations in the region. And we are aware of the reports from Iran about the death of possibly dozens of children, allegedly as the result of a strike that hit an elementary school in the town of Binab. United States authorities have announced they are looking into these reports. 1 in every 5 children is living in or fleeing a conflict zone. This adds up to 473 million children. Grave violations against children, verified by the United Nations, increased by a staggering 25% from 2023 to 2024. Rape and other forms of sexual violence rose by 35%. These horrific figures should impel us to do more to protect children in conflict. I pay tribute to the First Lady of the United States for her work to give visibility to the issue of children in conflict, and particularly for her personal engagement to reunite Ukrainian children with their families. Madam President, when conflicts do not rob children of their life and physical security, they deprive them of the right to have a quality education and a future of opportunities. 234 million children in crisis and conflict situations currently need educational support. 85 million are completely out of school. In violent conflicts, schools can be one of the only safe spaces that protect children from recruitment, trafficking, and exploitation. Schools can safeguard health and hygiene, provide psychosocial support, and connect families to essential services. Education in conflict zones is life-saving and life-sustaining. And yet schools, teachers, and education infrastructure continue to suffer violence. In 2024 alone, the United Nations verified a total of 2,374 attacks on schools and hospitals. Many more are unverified due to a lack of access. Most attacks in 2024 took place in Ukraine, Israel, the occupied Palestinian territory, and Haiti. In its resolution 2601, the Council urged all conflict parties to immediately cease attacks against schools, children, and teachers, and noted that such attacks are in contravention of international humanitarian law. It called on all parties to safeguard, protect, respect, and promote the right to education. The international legal framework is clear. We must act. Madam President, the challenges of providing quality education in conflict situations are tremendous. Infrastructure, from electricity to classrooms to digital connectivity, is often crumbling or at risk. Educators are few and far between. We face a shortage of 44 million teachers in conflict settings. Digital learning can offer access to education when schools are closed or inaccessible, or when students are fleeing violence. And the UN has made a concerted investment in these approaches. Private-public partnerships, when grounded in strong ethical frameworks, can help us deliver and expand access to innovative education technologies. For example, UNICEF's Learning Passport, developed in partnership with Microsoft, offers 10 million children in 47 countries a mobile learning platform where they can have continuous access to quality education. The Instant Network Schools program, a joint project of the Vodafone Foundation and UNHCR, allows refugees and teachers to access digital educational content and the internet, improving the quality of education in some of the most marginalized communities in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and South Sudan. Technology allows education to reach the most vulnerable and those excluded from the formal educational system. In Afghanistan, to respond to the exclusion of 2.2 million girls from education, UNESCO is mobilizing digital technologies to bring learning directly into the homes and communities, reaching close to 9,000 school communities in the country. To ensure that opportunities provided by technology are realized, we must mitigate its risks. Children in conflict face heightened online threats, exploitation, trafficking, radicalization, digital recruitment into groups, and cyberbullying. Digital education must therefore actively promote child protection with risk assessments at every stage, from conception to deployment. We must strengthen legal and policy frameworks to protect the rights of the child in the digital space, in line with international human rights law. Technology companies have a particular role to play in providing safeguards to their users, especially children and young people. Unfortunately, funding for education in emergencies has dropped by 24%, even though needs are increasing. We call on member states to do more to meet funding gaps in education. Madam President, the most effective way to protect children from conflict is to prevent and end wars. Building peace is at the heart of what the United Nations does. We must all work together toward this goal. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as First Lady of the United States. First, my heartfelt condolences to the families who have lost their heroes, who sacrificed their lives for freedom. Their bravery and dedication will always be remembered. I extend my earnest wishes for a swift and smooth recovery to all those who have been injured. You are in my thoughts and prayers during these challenging times. The U.S. stands with all of the children throughout the world. I hope soon peace will be yours. Ambassador Waltz, I'm grateful for the distinguished honor to preside over the United Nations Security Council as the United States assumes its presidency. Undersecretary General DiCarlo, thank you for welcoming me here today. Your generosity reflects the dignity with which you hold your post. Thank you for your warm welcome, United Kingdom, France, Russian Federation, China, Greece, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Denmark, Panama, Liberia, Somalia, Colombia, Pakistan, Bahrain, and Latvia. Collectively, your mission to maintain security while upholding the responsibility of preventing conflict during times of both war and peace is significant, must be applied evenly, and should never be carried out lightly. Peace does not need to be fragile. Enduring peace will be achieved when knowledge and understanding are fully valued within all societies. The value placed on education by nations' leaders shape the core of their country's belief system. A nation that makes learning sacred protects its books, its language, its science, and its mathematics. It protects its future. This leads to something powerful, to greater understanding, moral reasoning, and tolerance of others. Peace. Children raised in a culture rooted in intelligence develop confidence, innovate, build, compete, and maintain a deep value system. Their knowledge fosters empathy for others, transcending geography, religion, race, gender, and even local norms. They become caring people. But children raised in culture rooted in ignorance are surrounded by disorder and sometimes even conflict. These societies are filled with rigid thinkers who embrace prejudice and shun human dignity. When a nation restricts thought, it restricts its own future. Education is widely recognized as a fundamental human right, and yet today, so many children and young adults are banned from attending secondary schools and universities. The cost is not abstract. Imagine the loss of potential to our collective humanity, new medical breakthroughs, advancement in food security, groundbreaking technologies, all gone. A society that excludes vast segments of its population can realize only a fraction of its potential. Societies ruled by knowledge and wisdom are therefore more peaceful. We must cultivate a just moral imagination for the next generation, for our children, building an infrastructure of understanding. Knowledge is a power. It shapes titans of industry and inspires courageous social pioneers. We must capture this positive energy and ignite it across continents to transform our world throughout our digitally connected human race. Intellect blossoms humanity's fundamental needs: shelter, food security, clean water, and healthcare. And predictably, almost all communities will have access to knowledge within our lifetimes. The global community must facilitate complete access to technology so that every individual can reach their full potential through education. We must strive to achieve connectivity in the most remote locations and the furthest distances from our cities. This objective is entirely feasible and is already on the way. Today, roughly 6 billion individuals, about 70% of people on planet Earth, have a mobile device and use the internet. If our nations band together, we can close the technological divide, empowering all to reach their full potential. From a solitary farmer on a remote Greek island to a quiet genius in Somalia or a dreamer in uptown Manhattan, anyone can read the vast treasury of human knowledge created over centuries, which is now codified and accessible through artificial intelligence. As a single digital nation state, inevitable, perhaps this idea isn't so far-fetched, since digital currency and payment system via blockchain plus AI's massive factual database is already revolutionizing media and financial markets. We are in the age of imagination, a period where technology can be free and unrestricted by land borders. Indeed, now is the time for our generation to elevate our children above ideology through access to wisdom. AI is democratizing knowledge, which was once confined to university libraries. AI is creating a new reality for our children by distributing the traditional academic path to information. Today, almost anyone, anywhere can access a vast universe of data in the palm of their hand. Let's connect everyone to knowledge through AI, including those in the most remote geographic regions of our world. Look at what this truly means. In a matter of seconds, without travel, one can quickly learn about another's beliefs, religions, customs, and histories. We are open, and it is empowering. AI can provide us with an understanding of each other's needs and the needs of our children. AI is redefining who gets to participate in the global economy of ideas. I believe our shared intellect future will prove to be a more secure, harmonious, advanced civilization. The path to peace depends on us taking responsibility to empower our children through education and technology. Conflict arises from ignorance, but knowledge creates understanding, replacing fear with peace and unity. Security Council members, I encourage you to pledge to safeguard learning in our communities and promote access to heightened education for all. I implore you to build a future generation of leaders who embrace peace through education. Thank you.
That was U.S. First Lady Melania Trump presiding over the UN Security Council meeting today. She also Let's take a 2-minute break. We'll be right back with more.
City. Austin police say around 2 a.m. Monday, a man driving a black SUV circled the block before opening fire out of
Headway has provided an incredible sense of freedom to have a practice in a way that I want to live.
Thanks for joining us on a special edition of the show covering all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. The whole world is watching closely tonight after the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran over the weekend. This is when having a nightly political talk show is so critical, so important. We'll go on beyond reporting just the bottom line. We're going to unpack what this means for all of us here in Metro Detroit. From the possible political fallout to reaction from an Arab American and a closer look at how these types of operations go down, we're taking a closer look at everything that's happened since the strikes on Saturday. Those sirens in Israel, a sign of a region that's on edge after the U.S. and Israel launched strikes on Iran Saturday morning, prompting a swift retaliation. Now, at this hour, we know 6 U.S. service members have died, the military announcing 2 who were actually previously unaccounted for have been confirmed dead. In the meantime, the Iranian Red Crescent Society says the operation has killed at least 555 people there, and Israel says 11 people died after several locations were hit by Iranian missiles. Now, while we don't have a specific number, we do know dozens were killed in Israel's retaliatory strikes against Hezbollah. And in case you missed it, the attacks killed Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah al-Khamenei. The Ayatollah was 86 years old. He'd been in power since the year 1989. Meantime, President Trump said while he expects operations to last 4 to 5 weeks, the U.S. is prepared to go even longer than that. He says the goals are not only to wipe out Iran's Navy and destroy its missile capabilities, but make sure it can't get a nuclear weapon or support groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. The president talking about Iran at a Medal of Honor ceremony today.
We have the strongest and most powerful by far military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that.
But President Trump is facing criticism from some members of Congress because he didn't get congressional approval. You know from civics class that Congress has the power to declare war. And while the last time that happened was World War II, there's also the War Powers Resolution of 1973, which basically requires Congress to be consulted before, unless there's threat of an imminent attack. Senator Gary Peters had this to say when asked to compare this situation to Iraq back in the early 2000s. Take a listen.
Although it wasn't a formal declaration of war, Congress did act. We had an authorization for the use of military force. So basically, Congress said at the time, we have a situation where we need to deal with threats, particularly terrorist threats from a variety of areas. And so Congress actually voted to give the president authorization to use force when the president thought that it was necessary. That exist in this case. That authorization for the use of military force does not exist. This clearly just came out of the blue. And the fact that the president hasn't been able to articulate a plan, not just to Congress, but to the American people, now he's saying we could be there for several weeks. He's also saying we're likely to see, in addition to the service members who have already been killed in this war, more are going to die. He owes it to the American people, and particularly when we send our sons and daughters into harm's way.
Now we're getting analysis from all angles, starting with the possible political fallout, both here in the U.S. and abroad. Oakland University Political Science Chair Dr. Peter Trumbore is in Studio C with us tonight, and as always, we thank him for joining us on the broadcast. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, so we have what we just heard the senator say, which was he says not the same situation as had happened with Congress and Iraq, when President Bush at the time said, let's do this, we have to get into Iraq and root out weapons of mass destruction. However, we have since seen many presidents engage in military action without congressional express approval, a declaration from Congress, including President Obama, who I think 8 or 9 times went into military conflict without the declaration from Congress. What's different?
Well, let's be clear. We have not engaged in a military campaign of this magnitude since 2003, since that war with Iraq. I think that the difference is there's no meaningful evidence that Iran represented an actual imminent threat to the United States or its interests, not just here at home, but including in the region. Secretary of State Rubio met with Congress today, and afterwards, one of the things he said is that our decision to attack when we did was to prevent Iran from retaliating against the United States because we knew Israel was already planning to hit them. And so the idea was Israel's going to attack, so we may as well just go ahead and not wait for the Iranian response. That suggests to me that we could have perhaps spoken to our allies in Israel and maybe suggested they change their plans.
Well, so let's talk about this for a moment. The president has called this already a noble mission and saying that this was all to stop menacing activity and stop the proliferation of nuclear activity by Iran. Why do you believe that that is not the case?
Well, if you remember, back in June, the president said we had obliterated Iran's nuclear capability. So how did we go from having an obliterated Iranian nuclear program to arguments earlier this year that if we didn't do this, Iran was within weeks of getting nuclear capability? These things just don't add up. Look, we have longstanding grievances with the Iranians, that go all the way back to 1979. Just make no mistake about that. And Iran these are not good guys, right? This government was a threat to the region, absolutely. Has been a thorn in the side of the United States in terms of foreign policy and our regional sort of role there since 1979. By the same token, Iran did not represent a meaningful threat to the United States. And so this is very clearly a war of choice that the president has launched us into.
But when you look at this Iran being a threat to Israel, and that was pretty certain, at least from the Israeli point of view and from Netanyahu's point of view, hey, look, Iran is a terrible threat to Israel. And when the U.S. moves in and tries to protect its interests in its relationship with Israel, could that be then a justification or a reason?
Israel has had no problem managing the threat of Iran for years. We came in June at the end of a 12-day Israeli campaign against Iran and against Hezbollah. Right? Israel has essentially neutered Iran's chief proxy allies in the region, Hezbollah and Hamas. And so this idea that somehow now Iran represents such an existential threat to Israel on Saturday that we now have to join with them in a decapitating strike against the Iranian leadership, and then this very broad-based attack on Iran's military and governmental capabilities across the country, I don't think that withstands close scrutiny.
What do you make of Israel just in the last 24 hours basically saying, we hope that the U.S. doesn't just come in swiftly and move out. We believe that this needs to be a sustained attack. Doesn't that show Israel's dependence on the U.S. to continue its forces?
I think Israel would like us to do the rest of the job on their behalf. I think Israel saw an opportunity to decapitate much of the leadership of the Iranian government, and they did. And I think they are now expecting us to finish the job. And as of earlier today, the Secretary of State said we can't rule out the use of ground forces. So that would represent a catastrophic, to my mind, a catastrophic escalation on the part of the United States. And this is certainly not something that the president's supporters voted for when they elected him to a second term of office.
And we're going to get into that in a moment with our other panelists about the America First policy that so many MAGA voters voted for. Trump on several occasions from 2016 to 2024, as recently as then, basically saying enough of these endless wars, America first. So we'll talk about that with Rocky and Osama. But I do want to ask you, who's in charge in the minute we have left of Iran right now? So the Ayatollah, who's, as you say, just an evil, awful person who's done atrocities beyond what the human mind can even keep scope of, is an 86-year-old person. Right. Wiped off the face of the planet. But now you have Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Mm-hmm. What is that, and who's in charge of that?
So the commander-in-chief of the IRGC was one of the leaders that was killed in the initial strikes. It looks like right now the people in charge of the government are the head of national security for Iran and the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament. That seems to be who is sort of running things.
Are these formidable people and forces? Like
Well, they're all regime elements, right? So some of the reporting that's come out over the last several days is that in Iran's preparation and expectation that war was coming, that they established essentially 4 layers of succession in their top leadership, so that if what happened on Saturday were to occur and the top level of leadership would be eliminated, there were people ready and prepared to step in and retain control of the government and its military.
And designated survivors in a certain sense, right?
And that seems to be what has happened.
Well, Dr. Peter Trumbauer, it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight with your perspective on the pulse. Come back and join us. You really help everyone at home unpack so much of this, which can be complicated. We are getting perspective from a man you know well. Next on the pulse, Arab American news publisher Osama Siblani. His perspective after the break.
Our brains are incredible, but memory can get complicated. That's why we created Nariva Memory 3D.
Back down on the pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics, here with his perspective on the situation in Iran, Arab American news publisher Osama Siblani. And it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us here tonight. All right, so look, this story that has unfolded in Iran, the opinions are not one. It's not monolithic. You have to look at all the different perspectives out here, and we thank you for sharing yours. What was your initial reaction when you heard that Iran was struck?
I wasn't surprised because it has been prepared. When you send so much munitions and so many airplanes, and so many jets and a lot of the carriers to the region, it means that you want to do something. And I don't know. I cannot tell you that I expected this, but it's a pizza. Spreading the cheese, making a pizza. So the president has made up his mind what he wants to do, and the negotiation was just buying time in order to get to the point where he attacks.
So let's rewind back to June when Israel and Iran were embroiled in conflict and the United States got involved. And when that happened, essentially President Trump said, we've obliterated their nuclear plans. So in the time between June and now, the president is saying they pose this threat. There is no doubt that people can look at the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. I've spoken to people here who are of Iranian descent, who've off the record and on the record told me that they are thrilled that this man is. He was terrible, and the things that he did were awful. Can we all come to agreement with that?
No.
Why?
Because a lot of people in America do not believe that this president is fit to be a president. So disagreements among people, it is normal. This is the norm. In America and here, we have people who are vehemently against the president. President Trump, and before him, President Biden. So there's always people who believe that the president or the leader is good. Other people believe that the leader is wrong.
But when you look at the atrocities under
Iran,
Ayatollah, right?
If you look at Iran after the assassination of Ali Khamenei, millions of people are in the street weeping. These are Iranians. Yes, there are Iranians who are dancing. Yes. But this is the nature of the beast. You have people who are supporting, you have people who are against. So
the people who are sad, Osama, that the Ayatollah is gone. Why are they sad?
Because he is their leader. And he is not only the leader of the Iranians, he is the leader of the Shia in the whole world. So a lot of people, follow him. So he is a formidable leader. We like him, we don't like him. That is an opinion. You can just disagree or agree. The problem here is that we try to vilify our enemies. One day Saddam Hussein is our friend, and he's fighting Iran. The next day we're fighting him and making him villain. So now I do not want, like every time we talk about Iran, they bring the opposition. I understand there is an opposition, but there are also people who support this regime. And apparently we have seen it in the streets of Iran, not somewhere else.
But the Ayatollah, when you look at his track record when it comes to human rights violations, they're longer than can be listed in this half-hour program. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, I mean, if you wanted to compare it with the human rights violation of the United States, we would be talking a lot more longer than that. You know, the United States have killed so many people around the world, in our wars, in Afghanistan, in Iran, and we're talking about the Iranian people who's killing them. Who killed more? We killed more Iranians than the Iranian killed Iranians. You know, what about Afghanistan? What about Vietnam? What about Syria? What about Lebanon? What about all these killing? Iraq? We invaded Iraq on false pretense. Like right now, it's another episode of the weapons of mass destruction. All of a sudden, Iran is a threat.
What about the thousands of people during the protests that we've seen in the last 4 months on the streets of Iran, many of whom have been hung, taken away from their families and killed, beaten, bludgeoned by the Iranian government?
It may happen. I don't know. It may have happened.
But it has been proven that it happened, not from...
Who proved it?
Well, the United Nations has even said that this is indeed something that happened.
I did not read it in the United Nations. I'm not defending Iran. Okay, I'm not defending Iran. I'm just defending the truth in here. The truth is that we make a villain of our enemies, of the one that we wanted to attack, prepare the people, prepare the media, and just go there and attack them. That's exactly what happened in Iraq in 2003. It's happening again. Now, Iran. Now, are we going to continue on this path? This is the question. This president said he wants to stop wars. He wants to start peace. Everything that he has done since he started his second term is agitating people. One day he wants to take Canada. Another day he wants to take Greenland. Another day he wants to take Panama. Another day he wants to take Venezuela. Now he wants to take Iran. He says the other day that he is very happy with the guy who appointed him the president of Syria. This man is just not...
That so many Arab Americans were currying the favor of President Trump because of his policy with Israel and Gaza relative to what was happening with Kamala Harris. The Palestinians have allegiances shifted because of what you're saying now.
Well, first of all, Arab Americans did not vote in large numbers for Donald Trump. I mean, I can tell you that. Yes, he increased his numbers in Arab Americans, but they did not vote for him. And Kamala Harris did not distinguish herself from Biden and his policy in the Middle East, and that's why she did not get the votes.
We're going to continue this conversation, which has so many layers, and we thank you for taking the challenging questions as well to help us understand where different perspectives are right now. Osama Sablani, Arab American News, thank you for your time here tonight on The Pulse. Good to see you. We're getting military perspective next on The Pulse. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Rocky Rachkowski weighs in. What does he think? That's next on The
Department of State security updates for U.S. citizens. Fury, as of now, no State Department evacuations are planned, though that could change by the hour. At the State Department, Jillian Turner, Fox News.
And Secretary Rubio did speak to the press after briefing top lawmakers on the U.S. military operation in Iran. We're going to play out those comments for you when we come back after this break. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Shauna Kalafi, and we are continuing to follow the latest developments out of the Middle East. Secretary of State Marco Rubio briefing congressional leaders today. The entirety of Congress will be briefed tomorrow on Operation Epic Fury, the U.S. strikes on Iran over the weekend, and those ongoing military operations in the Middle East. Secretary Rubio speaking to the press after that briefing today. Let's listen.
Going back to the purpose of this is to destroy that missile capability. Why does Iran want that ballistic missile capability? What they are trying to do and have been trying to do for a very long time is build a conventional weapons capability as a shield where they can hide behind it. Meaning, there would come a point where they have so many conventional missiles, so many drones, and can inflict so much damage that no one can do anything about their nuclear program. That is what they were trying to do, is put themselves in a place of immunity where the damage they could inflict on the region would be so high that no one can do anything about their nuclear program or their nuclear ambitions. They are producing, by some estimates, over 100 of these missiles a month. Compare that to the 6 or 7 interceptors that can be built a month. They can build 100 of these a month, not to mention the thousands of one-way attack drones that they also have. They've been doing this for a very long time, and by the way, they've been doing it under sanction. You see the attacks they're conducting right now? They're attacking airports, they're attacking hotels, they're hitting not just military bases, they're attacking our embassies directly, they're attacking facilities that have nothing to do with war or with military, and that's a weakened Iran. That's in Iran despite years of sanction. Imagine a year from now, or a year and a half from now, the capabilities they would have to inflict damage on us. It's an unacceptable risk, especially in the hands of a regime that's run by radical clerics. The Ayatollah was a radical cleric. That entire regime is led by radical clerics who don't make geopolitical decisions. They make decisions on the basis of theology, their view of theology, which is an apocalyptic one. That has to be taken very seriously as well. So that was the purpose for what this operation is all about. That's what it's focused on. As the president said earlier today, it is on or ahead of schedule. I will defer to the Department of War to discuss the progress being made at a tactical level, but it was the right decision and an important decision for the safety and security of the world.
Does Congress have to weigh in? Is the president declaring does Congress have to weigh in? And was there an imminent threat? Did you tell lawmakers that there was an imminent threat?
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen, and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
Because of an impending Israeli action?
No, first of all, let me two things I would say. Number one is, no matter what, ultimately this operation needed to happen. That's the question of why now. But this operation needed to happen because Iran in about a year or a year and a half would cross the line of immunity, meaning they would have so many short-range missiles, so many drones, that no one could do anything about it because they could hold the whole world hostage. Look at the damage they're doing now. And this is a weakened Iran. Imagine a year from now. So that had to happen. Obviously, we were aware of Israeli intentions and understood what that would mean for us, and we had to be prepared to act as a result of it. But this had to happen no matter what.
President Trump said overnight that his top choices to now run Iran were killed in the strikes. So the United States have a firm plan for how they intend to handle this power vacuum in Iran to ensure that hardliner does not take
So two things can be true. Number one is our mission and our focus is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and their ability to manufacture them, as well as the threat posed by their Navy to global shipping. That's their objective. That said, we would not mind, we would not be heartbroken, and we hope that the Iranian people can overthrow this government and establish a new future for that country. We would love for that to be possible. But the objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and of their naval capabilities.
Are you saying, based on that, are you saying that there is no responsibility, no plan for the U.S. to at least play a role in whatever government comes?
Hello. Hi, I'm
espresso machine.
And I'm with Terra Cafe. I bring the coffee shop to your countertop and through it.
And make sure they can't rebuild it, and make sure that they can't hide behind that to have a nuclear program. That's the objective of the mission. That said, abundantly clear, we would love for there to be an Iran that's not governed by radical Shia clerics. As I've said myself repeatedly for years, the leadership of that country does not reflect the people of Iran, and I think that's been pretty apparent in the protests that you've seen. If there's something we can do to help them down the road, we'd obviously be open to it, but that's not the objective. The objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capability. What now?
Regime change has not gone well for the United States for many, many decades. How do you assure the American public that things will not get worse for the next regime that comes in there and replaces the United States?
Well, we would love to see this regime be replaced. And ultimately, as the president has said, he calls... No, but let me finish my answer. As the president has said, he would love for the people of Iran to use this as an opportunity to rise up and remove these leaders. They've been wanting to remove them for a long time. We've seen successive waves of protests, and we've seen them slaughter people. Okay? But the objective of this mission is to make sure they don't have these weapons that can threaten us and our allies in the region. That's why we're doing what we're doing now. And while we would love to see a new regime, the bottom line is no matter who governs that country a year from now, they're not going to have these ballistic missiles and they're not going to have these drones to threaten us. That's the objective of this mission, is to deny them the ability to use ballistic missiles to threaten their neighbors, to threaten our bases, to threaten our presence in the region, and ultimately as a shield behind which they can do whatever they want with their nuclear weapons ambition. We were not going to let them hide behind that, and that's why this was such a critical mission to undertake now while they were at their weakest point, and not a year from now where they could inflict even more damage and perhaps already be behind that point of immunity. Going you and then you.
Your critics in Congress have said that they should have a role, they should be able to weigh in here, and there are going to be more powers resolutions votes in Congress later this week. Why not notify Congress ahead of this? And does Congress?
Well, we did notify Congress. I mean, we notified the Gang of Eight. We notified congressional leadership. There's no law that requires us to do that. The law says we have to notify them 48 hours after beginning hostilities. We've done that. I think the notification went today. But we did notify members of Congress in advance. But we can't notify 535 members of Congress. And the Congress can vote on whatever they want, but there's no law that requires us to do that. And I want to say something because I see people on TV. Look, that's fine. If they want to take a war powers vote, they can do that. They've done that. They've done that a bunch of times. But there's no, people keep saying that there's no law that requires the president to have done anything with regards to this. To begin with, no presidential administration has ever accepted the War Powers Act as constitutional. Not Republican presidents, not Democratic presidents. That said, we have followed the notification at 48 hours, and we're here today. I've done more Gang of Eight briefings than I got in the 4 years that Biden was president, and I was a member of the Gang of Eight. All that said, we complied with the law 100%. And we're going to continue to comply with it. We've done the notification, and we officially to Congress, but we did notify members of Congress. We just can't notify 535 people. That's not possible. But we did the Gang of Eight twice. I briefed them last week, and then I called them the night before the operation.
Can you tell us what you know, Mr. Secretary, of the administration about the strike on a building in southern Iran? The Iranians are saying it was a school, reported largely including two.
Yeah, I've seen those reports. I would refer you, not because I'm not trying to answer your question, but I don't want to get it wrong. The Department of War would be investigating that, and that was our strike. And I would refer your question to them, and I'll make sure they're aware that you have that question. But we'd like to know. Well, clearly, the United States would not deliberately target a school. Our objectives are missiles, both with the ability to manufacture them and the ability to launch them, and the one-way attract drones. That would be our focus, and that's what we would be focused on. We would have no interest and, frankly, no incentive to target civilian infrastructure. The Iranians are, on the other hand, targeting civilian infrastructure. You guys have seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. They're hitting hotels. They're hitting embassies. They're hitting airports. They're hitting oil infrastructure. Well, it'd be very tragic, but I can't speak to the details behind it because I just don't have it. It would be a tragic outcome if it's happened. I don't have the details as to what led to it. But what is clear is that the United States would not deliberately target a school. They are, on the other hand, deliberately targeting civilians, as you've seen, because you know why? They are a terroristic regime. They sponsor terrorism and they participate in terrorism.
What's your message to Americans who are concerned about rising energy prices, given the spiking of oil prices today?
Yes, and we knew that going in would be a factor, and so we have a program in place that will begin to be implemented by Secretary Wright, Secretary Besson. We talked about it last night, again, about this program. We talked this morning, and starting tomorrow, you will see us rolling out those phases to try to mitigate against that. Obviously, markets are going to be reacting to news about what's happening. And again, a reminder, think about it, okay? This terroristic regime, led by radical clerics, has the ability, potentially, to shut off 20% of global energy. That's the kind of leverage they have because of their Navy. We're going to destroy their Navy. But there is a plan in place. We anticipated this could be an issue, and Secretary Wright and Besson will begin to roll out those steps starting tomorrow to mitigate against the impact that could have.
This is Secretary of State Marco Rubio taking questions from reporters after he briefed congressional leaders on Operation Epic Fury, the U.S. strikes in Iran over the weekend, and those ongoing military operations. This is a live look at Beirut right now, where we are hearing the IDF is conducting strikes this Tuesday morning. They say they are conducting simultaneous targeted strikes there in Lebanon as well as in Iran's capital city of Tehran, where explosions were also reported in the last couple of hours. Continuing our coverage of the situation in the Middle East, bringing you the latest developments as they happen right here on Live Now from Fox. This does it for my time on the desk, but we're going to take a quick break. After that, Karel Lahara has you covered with the very latest out of the Middle East. Thanks for watching Live.
Is found or until all leads are exhausted. Rhiannon?
Oh, still, we hope she makes it home, Aaron. Thank you so much. And tonight, before we go, a beautiful sight for nearly 3 billion people all over the world. Tonight, a total lunar eclipse creating a blood moon. Look at this. That is what happens when the Earth moves directly between the sun and the moon, casting a shadow. It appears a deep reddish orange color. It's gorgeous. A partial eclipse will occur at 4:50 a.m. Eastern. The total lunar eclipse at around 6 a.m. That's our show for this hour. I'm Rhiannon Alley. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Good night.
Oh, gum problems. You need new Parodontax Gum Strengthen and
happen at this time. The Secretary of State did issue a short video statement that he posted on his social media platform on X. Let's take a listen.
Priority is the safety and the security of American citizens everywhere in the world. Now, with what's going on in the Middle East with Operation Epic Fury and the cowardly attacks that we're seeing from Iran against Gulf countries, I wanted to take this chance to speak directly to Americans who are in the Middle East about the work we are doing to try to keep you safe. So immediately following the beginning of this operation, at my direction, the State Department activated a 24/7 task force, surging personnel and resources necessary to help provide American citizens with up-to-the-minute safety and security information. Now, in order to receive these updates from the nearest U.S. embassy or consulate, you have to register with the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. You have to register with STEP, and here's where you do it. You go to step.state.gov. That's step.state.gov and register so we can reach you. We also encourage Americans abroad to follow our security updates for U.S. citizens channel on WhatsApp and follow @TravelGov on social media as well. The latest alerts are also available on travel.state.gov. That's our website, travel.state.gov. Finally, Americans in the Middle East, you can reach the Department of State 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the following phone number: 1-202-501-4444. That's 1-202-501-4444.
And that was the latest video statement released by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, again urging Americans to be cautious and remain guarded as the situation does escalate. I also want to turn now to this. It's a social media post courtesy of the Israel Defense Forces. It says the IDF is now attacking in Tehran and Beirut simultaneously. The Air Force has now begun a wave of extensive strikes against the Iranian terror regime and the Hezbollah terror organization. Joining us now to talk about all of these latest developments is Alex Traiman. He is the CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief at the Jewish News Syndicate. Alex, good morning.
Good morning, Carol.
All right, so you've been joining us for the last several days as all of this continues to unfold. I want to start, though, with a social media post from the IDF that I just showcased and bringing onto our screen actually these compelling images that we are getting over in Beirut, Lebanon. So as you saw there from the IDF, they're informing the public of some of these operations that are ongoing. But how is the IDF adjusting those operations at this moment, particularly here along the northern border? What does that tell us about what could happen next?
Hezbollah, prior to October 7th, was considered to be a dominant paramilitary terror proxy force in the Middle East with tens of thousands of missiles, many of them short and medium range missiles, some of them precision guided that could really blanket the entire.
You introduce your buddy to DTF St. Louis. Whoa. He goes on this.
October 7th, that Israel succeeded to file back Hezbollah's capabilities, many estimates say by 75 to 80%. There is a belief that Hezbollah does have within its stockpiles maybe as many as 2,000 rockets and missiles that it could shoot at Israel. They have shot some, a handful at northern cities in Israel. They've also dispatched drones at Israel. In fact, just a few minutes ago, we entered and then exited bomb shelters with a drone alert that was reported to have been sent from Lebanon. And I think that perhaps Hezbollah has done Israel a big favor by just shooting a small amount. They have actually opened up this second front for the IDF, a front that the IDF was completely prepared for. The moment that this operation in Iran started, the IDF understood that this could be a multi-front war, and Israel and the IDF are insistent that they cannot have a terror proxy of Iran with weapons directly on Israel's northern border.
Excuse me there. I also want to turn now to a social media post from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's quite lengthy, but in part, he starts off by saying the Tehran terror regime fires on civilians and we fire on the Tehran terror regime to protect civilians.
We embarked on this campaign to remove existential threats and to create the conditions for the brave Iranian people to cast off the yoke of tyranny. That day is near, and when it arrives, Israel and the United States will be there. Going off of some of these comments, Alex, in the past 24 to 48 hours, what decisions from the Prime Minister and the Security Cabinet have most shaped the direction of this war?
Well, I think the first was to decide that in the early moments of the war to target the regime itself, that Ali Khamenei would not be the last target in this war, but would be the first target in this war, him together with 40 of his closest top advisors. I mean, this gives the conditions for the Iranian people to change their government direction after 47 years since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. You know, it's ironic because people thought that if Israel would launch this attack, that Israel would be freed from the threat of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles, and that is certainly true. But the ones that stand the most to gain from Israel and the United States' joint attack against Iran is actually the Iranian people, who themselves have been held hostage by this terror-sponsoring fanatical regime.
Just bringing back these images, that smoke there in the distance. Again, if anyone is just joining us here, that is out of Beirut, Lebanon. The IDF launching simultaneous strikes in Tehran and Beirut. Alex, Israeli officials, what are they signaling when it comes to this situation here, this confrontation? Is it more limited, contained? Are you hearing any indications that preparations are currently being made for a broader attack in the coming days?
Oh, absolutely. The IDF is preparing to, not preparing, they launched the broadest attack in the history of the Air Force and Israel's military history already from day one. They continue to do that. All signals from the Trump administration are that the actions inside Iran are only going to intensify. At the same time, the IDF is also indicating that the successes from the early days of the war have severely limited Iran's ability to fire ballistic missiles at Israel, and they're also reporting that they expect to see, we have already seen, a reduction in the number of ballistic missiles that have been fired directly at Israel. They said that yesterday there was half as many ballistic missiles fired at Israel as on the first day of the war, and maybe also we're seeing that Iran is changing the direction of their ballistic missiles rather than shooting them at Israel, which proves to have a very sophisticated ballistic missile defense system, that they are firing now more and more at the American allies in the region, including Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Bahrain and Qatar, and even firing as far away as Cyprus.
And Cyprus, actually, we just got that live image. I do believe we have it here on the screen. And ask my producer, Kima, is this Cyprus that we just routed in? She's going to be checking for us here. But we had those images yesterday. I do see there in the background it says, "Welcome to the Royal Air Force." So I do believe this is that base that was recently attacked by Cyprus. A couple of other live images that we also have. This one coming out of Tel Aviv in Israel. I want to turn now to the mood inside of Israel, Alex, especially in some of those communities that are facing rocket fire or evacuation orders. What is the mood from civilians? How is that affecting, if at all, any political pressure that the government is facing?
Well, on the one hand, certainly tension, and anytime that you have to be on high alert and you hear air raid sirens, you know, it causes anxiety, and people are running, you know, to the shelters, you know, several times a day still. But at the same time, there is a bit of a festive mood in the country. Today is actually a Jewish holiday. It's the holiday of Purim, and ironically, it's the holiday of a story 2,500 years ago where a Persian ruler named Haman wanted to destroy all of the Jewish people. And this is it's read in the book of Esther, and the Jewish people read that book of Esther today, and it is a holiday of joy, dressing in costumes after the Jewish people fought back very triumphantly against this Persian ruler named Haman, and there is no greater symbolism here in seeing how Israel knocked out a Persian leader named Khamenei, almost the same name in Hebrew, and so you see a lot of joy actually over this military operation, specifically because the United States is backing Israel in this operation, and there's a feeling in Israel that this is the last battle. That at the conclusion of this operation, Iran will no longer ever threaten Israel or the rest of the region. And the hope here is that this battle and this 2.5 years of war are actually going to usher in a generation of peace in the Middle East.
As you mentioned the U.S. and its support during that last answer, I want to turn now to comments that President Trump has made. He has said that this could potentially go on for more than 4 weeks. The U.S. is prepared for a prolonged war. In terms of where the Israeli military stands, the IDF, how prepared are they to sustain a long-term war?
I think both Israel and the United States are prepared to go as long as necessary, but I think that those statements are made to signal to Iran that they may not be able to hold out. If they thought that if they could only last a week or 2 weeks, that they could continue fighting and get some kind of a negotiated ceasefire, they would consider that a victory. By the president saying that, no, we're prepared to go 4 weeks, 5 weeks, even longer if necessary, it's a signal to Iran that they cannot keep this up. And I think it's also a message to the American public and to the Israeli public. President Trump, he has domestic concerns. He doesn't necessarily want a long war. If he thinks this war is going to last 2 weeks, he's probably telling the American public it can last 4 or 5 weeks, so that if it does last only 2 weeks, he can turn around and see it and tell the American public, see, I told you it would take 4 or 5 weeks and it only took 2. So it's all about setting expectations, both for the domestic audience, both for the Iranian audience. But yes, I mean, in terms of physical military power, both Israel and the United States have the capacity to go at this for as long as it takes.
Going back to the assessment of the situation as a whole, Alex, how are Israeli leaders managing the risk of miscalculation with Iran and Hezbollah right now, especially as we see the speed of this missile and drone exchange between several of these sides?
I think that Israel and the United States are prepared for any and all retaliation. I mean, as much as the fact that Iran could potentially have some kind of a dirty bomb or a chemical weapon, these are all taken into account. And in fact, the more serious the danger, the more urgent the need to take out this regime and its military capacity, because as the Prime Minister said on Sean Hannity's program on Fox last night, that the Iranian regime was ramping up its production of ballistic missiles and was also producing them deeper and deeper underground. And if they had reached a critical mass, then it would be much more difficult to prevent them from holding the entire region hostage. So the greater the danger, the more sense of urgency to take care of this now.
Alex, as I mentioned at the top, you've been joining us for the past couple of days. Right off the top, just to continue this coverage, we're following all of this as it evolves. If you have to assess the next 24 to 48 hours, what indicators are you watching out for to see if there is a sense of stabilization in the region?
Well, certainly the number of ballistic missiles that are fired at Israel. If Iran continues to fire more and more ballistic missiles at Israel, then you know that they have not been rolled back. But so far, everything that we're seeing and hearing from the IDF and from the United States, they are hitting their targets. They have complete air superiority, and they are targeting all of the critical targets of the regime and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, and most importantly, the ballistic missile stockpiles and launchers. Ballistic missiles are the main tool that Iran has to fight back against Israel and all of America's allies across the Middle East. If the number of ballistic missiles being fired is being reduced, I think that's the most significant symbol of Iran's waning power.
Alex Treyman, CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief at the Jewish News Syndicate. We always appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox. Take care, and we hope to check in soon.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. We are going to step away for a brief commercial break as we continue.
short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
We are facing an act of aggression, and obviously we have every right to defend ourselves.
We've been hit. We've been hit.
History unfolding in the Middle East. The U.S. and Israel carrying out an unprecedented military operation, crippling Tehran's leadership by taking out Iran's supreme leader, along with dozens of other top officials. The devastating blow to Iran's Islamic regime, a result of one of the largest military operations in the history of modern warfare, with 900 U.S. strikes in just 12 hours, using 2 aircraft carriers, 3 destroyers, and B-2 stealth bombers, and striking at least 500 Iranian targets.
We've already seen dozens of U.S. military bases targeted with retaliatory strikes as Iran vows revenge.
President Trump urging Iran not to return fire or face, quote, force that has never been seen before. The sentiment for Iranian Americans across the globe, elation, celebrations erupting after the strikes came down, and what could be the best hope for relief from the Islamic regime's reign in decades. We begin this morning with Jennifer Griffin to walk us through this history-making mission. And good morning, Jennifer. It's really quite remarkable when you look at the total package.
Griff, very remarkable, but also a complicated picture emerging this morning. The Iranian leadership that did survive, and there are a few leaders that did survive, the president, as well as Ali Larijani, who's very powerful in Iran, have threatened the U.S. and threatened to attack 27 U.S. bases across the Middle East. And we've been seeing a lot of those missiles flying into neighboring countries. A mob also tried to storm the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, and Pakistani security forces used batons to push back an angry crowd threatening the U.S. consulate in Karachi, Pakistan. Both Iraq and Pakistan, of course, have large Shia Muslim populations. And British Defense Secretary John Healey said 2 missiles had been fired towards Cyprus, where the British Army has service members stationed. In Tehran, following the announcement of the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, there were spontaneous outbursts of celebration on the one hand, but also some crowds chanting today in downtown Tehran, "Death to America." Not clear if these were spontaneous or organized protests, but you can assume that the remnants of the regime and the IRGC will want to present a united front, suggesting that the regime will survive. The man to watch is Ali Larijani, the head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. He just gave an interview in which he described the killing of Ali Khamenei as extremely painful, threatening revenge. Quote, "The United States and the Zionists have burned the heart of the Iranian people, and we will burn their hearts." Meantime, Iran managed to fire more than 300 missiles at the UAE, where the U.S. has a military base at Al Dhafra, about the same number as it fired toward Israel. Actually, about 100 ballistic missiles were fired toward Israel yesterday, according to the IDF. So this was actually more missiles fired at UAE. Iran has expanded its response, even firing missiles at Oman, which tried to negotiate that last-minute nuclear deal and avoid war. Qatar received about 65 Iranian missiles since yesterday, and Bahrain approximately 35. And explosions have been heard in eastern Riyadh, Saudi Arabia today. Israel, meantime, has increased its airstrikes and says it will now target Iran's nuclear facilities, and just moments ago hit the headquarters of the IRGC and barracks in Tehran. That is where the massacre of last month's Iranian protesters was organized and carried out. Smoke has been seen rising from near Iran's state broadcasting facility in Tehran. And in terms of the U.S. operation yesterday, the U.S. military, we learned, carried out 900 strikes in 12 hours. 10 to 15 senior leaders of the Iranian government and military were killed in that Israeli strike on Ali Khamenei's compound. Multiple sources tell me that the start of the operation, the joint operation, had to be moved up based on intelligence and this target of opportunity, a meeting at Khamenei's compound. Quote, there was a deliberate decision to accelerate the timeline. That is why the U.S. and Israel took the unusual decision to strike during the daytime to achieve the element of surprise and to target this meeting. Normally, the U.S. military would not launch an operation like this during the day. The meeting accelerated the timeline, I'm told. This was a massive, wildly bold daytime attack, a senior U.S. defense official told me. It caught the senior leadership off guard and on a Saturday morning during Ramadan and on Shabbat in the daytime. We hit the senior leaders right out of the gate, I was told. But some survived, including, as I mentioned, Ali Larijani, the man to watch, and Iran's president, who issued a statement just moments ago. Griff.
Yeah, and Jennifer, you mentioned what we're watching, what Larijani will do now. And, you know, I think we've focused so much on the IRGC, but would Larijani possibly try and go after or try to activate the Basij? People haven't talked much about the Basij, and it's important to understand that is a strong militia that can be sympathetic to the IRGC within Iran.
Absolutely. The Basij are like the internal police, this state police that are really very vicious and were responsible for a lot of the killing of those 32,000 protesters who were killed in December and January in Iran. The Basij are still a factor. Remember, we've talked about this in the past, but in the early days of the Iraq War, a lot of those security forces just took off their uniforms and floated and then reorganized and came back and began carrying out terror attacks. Now, the difference this time is the U.S. will not be occupying Iran. They don't have ground forces that are going in, so there won't be any targets inside Iran. But those Basij and the paranoia that's been created over decades of theocracy and state control and authoritarianism in Iran is going to make it may be one of the reasons you're not seeing people come out quite in the large numbers that you might expect after such strikes on their behalf. But I think people are scared, and they have a right to be scared that they were slaughtered in the last 2 months. So what you're also likely to see, Griff, is the IRGC launch through proxies, through sleeper cells around the world, targets of opportunity. They tend to fight asymmetrically with terror attacks, and that is what I would expect to see: assassinations, terror attacks. But it won't happen immediately. It'll be when we let down our guard. And I think the strategy right now, from what I am observing, is that Iran is firing missiles at all of the states surrounding in the region, all of the states that host U.S. military bases, trying to create so much chaos that there's maybe pressure at the UN or elsewhere calling for a stop to the war. And if they think they can just survive these initial strikes and then regroup, that is their strategy at this point. But I'm not sure it's going to work, because it's really mobilized all those strikes on UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia has just mobilized those nations to prepare to engage Iran at this time.
Jennifer, there's been a lot of people commenting at the level of intel that the U.S. and especially Israel had prior to this attack, that it's really been impressive. So they've taken out this leadership. You talk about the leaders that are left behind. Based on the intel that they have, I mean, do they think that this B team, or I don't know, maybe this is the C team that's left behind, do they have the ability, the authority, the capacity to do what the A team could do? I'm just curious if that was taken into account. Like, why weren't they also taken out? And then also the security, the special security forces that you and Griff were talking about.
Well, I think, first of all, Ali Larijani would be part of the A team. So some of the A team did survive. And that is what's dangerous in these kind of strikes. We've seen with Hezbollah and elsewhere that there are usually follow-on strikes. And usually the person who moves up in the rankings, they then have the bullseye on their back. Obviously, the U.S. and Israel have excellent intelligence. This could not have been carried out without human intelligence on the ground. They've been mapping these sites that they targeted for months, if not years. But in terms of the human intelligence that would have led to knowing that a meeting was taking place of 10 to 15 top leaders, I mean, you can't underestimate the impact, and also the impact of killing Ali Khamenei, who is the spiritual leader. That was, literally, as Ali Larijani said, a knife in the heart of those who followed him. So this was a very significant strike. It is not over, and there are still remaining leaders, and certainly they're going to be very careful about how they move around. But as soon as the U.S. and Israel can suppress the air defense systems, and they're in the process of doing that, they're going to have a lot easier than flying their air forces over Iranian territory, and then it becomes a lot harder for those leaders to hide. But that is still a few days off, I'm told. And in terms of the besiege, in terms of the IRGC, I mean, you're talking thousands of people who are in, if not 150,000 people who are in those security forces and who are believers, true believers, and who are willing to die, and suicide bombers and whatever have you. That is very hard to target. You can target their headquarters, you can target their leadership, but this is complicated. And remember, there are a lot of allies in Iraq. Iraq has a lot of Shia militias. We just heard that some of them have fired some missiles at some of the neighboring states as well, and they also are firing at a U.S. base in Erbil right now. So this is very complicated. There are Shia Muslims around the world there are many who will celebrate the end, if this in fact is the end of the theocracy in Iran. Many of those people who went into exile, the dissidents who left after the Shah's regime fell, but there are also many who supported that regime and believe that this was a strike on Shia Islam.
Jennifer Griffin, great reporting last 24 hours especially. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now to Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst live in Tel Aviv. Good morning, Trey. What is going on there now?
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Throughout the morning, we've heard air raid sirens sounding across Israel's second largest city. The Iranians still trying to respond. In the distance, you can still hear some of those car alarms going off after those incoming missiles were intercepted overhead. We are getting some new video from the Israelis, who launched a fresh round of strikes into the heart of Tehran this morning, going after a very specific building. Exclusively, an Israeli intelligence official tells Fox News that the building you see blown up here in the Iranian capital was used by the IRGC as a command center during the demonstrations earlier this year, as a place to order the crackdown against protesters. This official says that the specific location was used to command the massacring of protesters. Again, though, the Iranians have been responding over the past 24 hours. Overnight, we arrived at a scene of a direct missile impact here in Tel Aviv. A building was completely destroyed, and for blocks, there was damage just due to the blast radius from this explosion. One woman was killed in that building. Another woman nearby died running to a shelter. And when you step back here and you look at the amount of air defense that's being used to shoot down these missiles, it's not easy for the Israelis, but so far they have been quite successful. We do know Ali Larijani, the Supreme National Security Council leader in Iran, is threatening to renew strikes on Israel and regional countries, saying that Iran fired missiles at the United States and Israel yesterday, and today we will hit them with a force they have never experienced before. Well, President Trump is hearing those threats directly and warning the Iranian regime to stand down. The president posting to True Social overnight saying Iran just stated that they are going to hit very hard today, harder than they have ever been hit before. They better not do that, however, because if they do, we will hit them with a force that has never been seen before. The region waiting to see what comes next. The exchange of fire continues here on the ground, and the majority of the Israeli population, 10 million people, spending most of the day in bomb shelters. Guys?
Trey, obviously nobody has covered this more closely than on the ground than you have. Is there anything, what if anything, have you been surprised by in terms of the response, not necessarily by Iran, but by Iran's allies and proxies?
Well, the Iranians are directly targeting not just Israeli civilian population centers, but also Gulf countries. There is significant damage in Qatar, in the UAE, in Bahrain, Kuwait. And it shows that the Iranians, as Jennifer put it yesterday, really miscalculated their response, because now they are drawing in regional countries that maybe before were hesitant to allow the United States to use their airspace or even possibly directly participate in the strikes against Iran. And so there's a lot of questions on the table about whether or not these countries will get more directly involved. The Emiratis today were warning that they will not tolerate these missile barrages against their countries, and civilians are being injured in these Gulf countries, allies of the United States. And so that is certainly surprising. But when we look at these threats from the Iranian regime, it's almost as if they are not taking President Trump seriously. And we know that the Americans and the Israelis were working together to meticulously plan this operation that started with a series of airstrikes against Iran, decapitating the Iranian leadership. They took out Iran's supreme leader and 40 plus senior officials in the Iranian regime and the IRGC. And yet still you have leaders like Ali Larijani from Iran's Supreme Council that are saying they're going to hit Israel and the United States even harder. And so this tough talk doesn't last long. We saw similar statements from Iran's supreme leader. He's now dead. And so the president gave Iran a diplomatic off-ramp before this war began. He offered them an olive branch. He said, we're willing to make concessions. I was on a background briefing with a high-ranking U.S. official yesterday who said we offered the Iranians so much, and yet they still were not willing to come to the table in good faith and make a reasonable nuclear deal. And that's not even to mention their ballistic missile program or their support of regional proxies. And so what's left of the Iranian regime leadership, they're still threatening the United States and Israel.
But Trey, isn't that the danger that at this point it's existential for Iran, that they almost have nothing to lose or don't feel like they can go to the negotiation table and last as leaders there? I want you to answer that question. My other question is, given the fact that President Trump said this is only going to last a couple weeks, and that's what the hope was, does the fact that these other Persian Gulf countries that they've been attacked have had damage and also casualties, does that increase the pressure on the American administration, on the Trump administration, to take care of this quickly before it gets out of hand?
Great questions, and I'll answer here in two parts. The first question having to do with sort of the broader regional considerations. And look, the Iranians have the ability to launch ballistic missiles. They have short-range ballistic missiles that they are now using to target these Gulf countries. They have drones. They have anti-ship missiles. We understand a tanker was hit in the Persian Gulf overnight. But despite these efforts, they have actually responded in a relatively weak way when you compare their response to the 12-day war. They simply aren't able to launch these ballistic missiles in massive barrages that they could do before. And that is largely in part because the United States and Israel have worked together using their intelligence agencies to monitor the coast of Iran. They've had drones flying back and forth, watching to see if these ballistic missile launchers were going to pop out from underground positions, and then they're hammering them with airstrikes. And so the Iranians are getting off what they can, but they can't sustain this for weeks. This is a matter of days before, first of all, there's air superiority over the entire country of Iran for the United States and Israel. But secondly, Iran's ability to launch large-scale ballistic missile attacks, which is largely seen as their biggest lever to pull. The other question has to do with these Gulf countries and the ability of them to respond. It would not be surprising if they get more directly involved. But what we should note here is the trust that was developed in the region over the past year. We've heard from Gulf leaders speaking about the American administration in a way that they've not talked before about U.S. presidents. President Trump's been able to do something in the region using two of his most important members of the administration, his special envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner. And they've been able to use back channels to develop a new sense of trust among these Gulf partners. And that led to not only support for the ceasefire in Gaza, Board of Peace participation, but also close coordination as it relates to this war. And so we have to imagine these conversations are continuing each and every day. And I've been talking with regional officials, diplomats in the Gulf, even as recently as yesterday, and they appear confident in President Trump's decision-making and what will come next in this conflict.
All right, I'll tell you this, Trey. If we see Emirati fighter jets striking targets in Tehran, that will be a game changer to your point about the allied Gulf region participation. Trey Yingst, live on the ground in Tel Aviv. Trey, great reporting as always. Stay safe.
I'm Steve Doocy. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
When I used to think about counseling, I pictured an office and a couch. It didn't feel like it was for me. But the truth is, just like I wouldn't ignore a check engine light, I knew my health shouldn't be ignored either. With telehealth, I can talk to a professional from my garage or my kitchen table.
When life's road gets rough, help is closer than you think. Telehealth counseling is private, convenient, and a real option for Nebraskans. If you're ready to seek help, contact your doctor or health insurance provider for telehealth options.
And before we get into the program,
And the world is better off for it.
Kingdom itself on the mainland, and whether or not politically this is something politically to its domestic audience, that it's something that it's willing to do.
See, that's interesting, and that brings me to my next point, because British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said that the UK is not involved directly in this war. We've also heard some other comments from the leaders of France, the leaders of Germany, for example. So what exactly would be the red lines for them to be considered directly part of this war and to officially go all in, for example, like how the US and Israel have?
I think it's really important to remember that the United Kingdom is not part of the European Union. It's not constrained by the need to come up with a common position between EU member states. And we're seeing from Brussels really polarized views from the European Union. There are countries like Greece who who were set to join this international security force to go into Gaza, to understand the need for military security and stability in the region, who, as I said, have started deploying to protect Cyprus, its neighbour, and to protect its allies and protect the UK's bases in the region. Then you have countries like Spain, who not only are they against this war altogether, they seem to be framing their opposition to the war as first of all, within a legal framework, saying that it goes against the UN Charter, where very clearly that this is part of the ongoing hostilities since 7th of October, and also very clearly there is an Article 51 self-defense justification for striking the regime when the regime is threatening to develop nuclear weapons and use them against Israel to wipe it off the map, and to use them against the United States, which it's said very clearly over time. But Spain also is taking a position that it's viewing this through the lens of Israel and Palestine and a two-state solution. So they're not even really talking so much about the war in Iran. That polarization, that fragmentation within the EU means that it's very difficult to know how European Union countries would respond to any of its military personnel being killed directly from within any of the member states, or to any direct attacks on member states. Clearly, if there's an attack on the sovereign territory of a NATO country, that would trigger the NATO Alliance Pact. Clearly, if there was a direct attack on the on the military personnel that killed military personnel, that would warrant a stronger response. Certainly, there would be a drive from the domestic public. If there were UK military personnel killed within some of these attacks, there would be a change in focus.
trying to figure out what they're going to do next. So we're just going to have to keep our eye out and see. Everything has been developing quickly, and it's escalated quickly. So a similar exchange happened just yesterday. So my question is, how is Parliament going to be impacted here? What is their role in terms of if and when it's decided that the UK is going to expand its military posture, or when they decide what they're going to do militarily in this conflict?
I mean, the role of Parliament clearly to make the decisions about whether it's lawful for the UK to go to war, and they have to take that under advisement. It's not the Prime Minister are on the table. There's, as we both said, there are so many moving parts here that they need to have answers for any given scenario that might arise. And then the role of Parliament would also be to hold the government to account, to ask the tough questions about whether or not this war is lawful, whether or not the UK joining the war is lawful, what to the British nationals who are stranded abroad, and what the UK priorities are. But at the end of the day, the way that Parliament functions is that it will be the government making these decisions and then Parliament scrutinising them in a very public way. Members of the public can attend. Many of these sessions are being screened live, as well as being able to watch them at any given point live on the internet. But really, the expertise that the government is relying on is the expertise that's built up over many years from the different ministries, from the different civil service groups, and they will be the ones who are providing that evidence base for the government to make its decisions.
My final question to you today, Rosa, would be what are you really watching out for in the coming days or weeks, perhaps, as we follow along some of the escalation with this conflict? And what key indicators are there to know and to give us a sort of sense and a glimpse as to what are the next steps when it comes to Europe and the UK specifically?
I think the key thing that I'll be watching out for is to what extent this war can be contained. There's no way of knowing how long it will continue. As your president said, it could end with de-escalation talks tomorrow, but it could take many weeks for it to finish. But I've been looking to see how well it's contained within the region and how many countries get brought into the war. It seems almost like Iran is looking to bring other countries into the war and to make this into not just a regional conflict, but to spill over borders. Now, the United Nations purpose, when it was built in 1945, was to prevent another Third World War. And no matter what its flaws may be, no matter how many international conflicts there have been, we have not had a Third World War since 1945, not throughout the Cold War, and not beyond. What the deep concern here is that Iran, alongside its allies in terms of Russia, potentially in terms of China, or China in the shape of North Korea, which it would use as its kind of lapdog here, if they were to be brought into the conflict, then what we would see is this turning into a world war. So I think, for me, it's not really about looking at what's going on in that region. It's about looking about what's going on the edges of the war, on the fringes of who's being sucked in.
Rosa Friedman, a professor with the University of Reading, also an international law expert. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here, help break down this incredibly complex situation as more countries and world leaders are following closely as well. You take care.
Thank you.
We're going to step away for another quick commercial break, continuing with more of this coverage when we come back. if you were with us just before the commercial break, we had an entire conversation with an international law expert just to break down how the UK, European nations as well, are responding to the conflict that continues to escalate in the Middle East, given those strikes against Iran that first happened early Saturday morning. We continue to have live images out of Cyprus where one British military base was struck by Iran. And we're really focused to see what UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Parliament there are going to decide to do next, given this conflict that's unfolding. Now, Prime Minister Starmer did issue a statement on Parliament floor, and he also posted it to his social media account on X. I want to play it for you next.
With permission, I will update the House on the situation in Iran and the wider region and our response. Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom was not involved in the initial strikes on Iran by the US and Israel. That decision was deliberate. We believe that the best way forward for the region and for the world is a negotiated settlement in which Iran agrees to give up any aspirations to develop a nuclear weapon and ceases its destabilizing activity across the region. That has been the long-standing position of successive British governments. President Trump has expressed his disagreement with our decision not to get involved in the initial strikes. But it is my duty to judge what is in Britain's national interest. That is what I've done, and I stand by it. But, Mr. Speaker, it is clear that Iran's outrageous response has become a threat to our people, our interests, and our allies, and it cannot be ignored. Iran has lashed out across the region. They've launched hundreds of missiles and thousands of drones at countries which did not back them, including the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Iraq, Bahrain, and Oman. And overnight, Hezbollah, Iran's proxy in Lebanon, launched attacks on Israel, seeking to escalate the war. Mr. Speaker, there are an estimated 300,000 British citizens in the region, residents, families on holiday, and those in transit. Iran has hit airports and hotels where British citizens are staying. It is deeply concerning for the whole House and the whole country. And Mr. Speaker, our armed forces are also being put at risk by Iran's actions. On Saturday, Iran hit a military base in Bahrain with missiles and drones. There were 300 British personnel on the base, some within a few hundred yards of the strike. Last night, a drone hit Arif Akrotiri in Cyprus. There were no casualties in this strike. Mr. Speaker, it is important for me to say that our bases in Cyprus are not being used by US bombers. The security of our friends and partners in Cyprus is of critical importance. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to be clear. The strike on Arif Akrotiri in Cyprus was not in response to any decision that we have taken. In our assessment, the drone was launched prior to our announcement. Iran's aggression towards Britain and our interests is long-standing, and that's why we've always ensured that protections for British bases and personnel are at their highest level. Speaker, it is very clear that the death of the Supreme Leader will not stop Iran from launching these strikes. In fact, their approach is becoming even more reckless and more dangerous to civilians. They are working ruthlessly and deliberately for a plan to strike not only military targets, but also economic targets in the region, with no regard for civilian casualties. That is the situation we face today. and to which we must respond. Mr. Speaker, I've been speaking to our Gulf partners over the weekend. They're outraged by Iran's acts, particularly as they played no part in any strikes, and they've asked us to do more to defend them. Moreover, it is my duty, the highest duty of my office, to protect British lives. That is why we put British jets in the air, Typhoons and F-35s, as part of coordinated defensive operations, which have already successfully intercepted Iranian strikes, including, Mr. Speaker, taking out one drone that was heading towards a coalition base in Iraq, housing UK service personnel. I want to pay tribute to our brilliant servicemen and women, putting themselves in harm's way to keep others safe. And I know the whole House will join me in expressing our gratitude and our respect. But, Mr. Speaker, it is simply not possible to shoot down every Iranian missile and every drone after they've been launched. The only way to stop the threat is to destroy the missiles at source, in their storage depots or at the launches. The US requested permission to use British bases for that specific and limited defensive purpose because they have the capabilities to do so. Yesterday evening, we took the decision to accept that new request in order to prevent Iran firing missiles across the region, killing innocent civilians, putting British lives at risk, and hitting countries that have not been involved. To be clear, the use of British bases is limited to the agreed defensive purposes. We are not joining the US and Israeli offensive strikes. The basis for our decision is the collective self-defense of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. It is in accordance with international law, and we've produced a summary of our legal advice, which clearly sets this out. We will keep the decision under review. Mr. Speaker, we are not joining the strikes, but we will continue our defensive actions in the region. France and Germany are also prepared to enable US action to destroy Iran's capability to fire missiles and drones from source. I've been in close contact with President Macron and Chancellor Merz in recent days, as well as President Trump and leaders across the region to that end. Mr. Speaker, be in no doubt, the regime in Iran is utterly abhorrent. In January, they murdered thousands of their own people, the full horror of which is still hidden from the world. For decades, they have sought to destabilize the region and export terror around the world. Their proxies in Yemen have targeted British ships in the Red Sea. They've facilitated Russia's attacks in Ukraine. The regime's tentacles have even reached these shores, posing a direct threat to Iranian dissidents and to the Jewish community. Over the last year alone, Iran has backed more than 20 potentially lethal attacks on UK soil, each of which, Mr. Speaker, we have foiled. So it's clear the Iranian regime must never be allowed to get their hands on nuclear weapons. That remains the primary aim of the United Kingdom and our allies, including the US. And ultimately, this will have to be achieved at the negotiating table. Mr. Speaker, in this dangerous moment, our first thoughts are with our citizens in the region, friends, family members, and constituents. I recognise the deep concern that the situation is causing for those involved and for communities across the country. We're asking all British citizens in the region to register their presence so we can provide the best possible support, and to monitor the Home Office travel advice, which is being regularly updated. Across much of the region, airspace remains closed, and local authorities are advising individuals to shelter in place. The situation on the ground may remain challenging for some time. So we're sending rapid deployment teams to the region to support our British nationals on the ground. And we're in close contact with the travel industry and governments in the region, including with our friends in the UAE, given the concentration of British nationals in that country. And we're looking at all options to support our people. We want to ensure that they can return home as swiftly and safely as possible. The FCDO phone lines are open to provide consular support, and ministers are available to meet MPs to discuss any individual cases. Mr. Speaker, we're also reaching out to communities across the United Kingdom, including Muslim and Jewish community organisations, and we're making sure that sites across the country, including places of worship, have appropriate protective security in place. Mr. Speaker, the situation in the region is developing rapidly, so we will continue to update the House.
Walk into Super Saver and discover a welcoming shopping experience where low prices meet high quality.
With ever greater frequency, hitting our economy, driving up prices on the supermarket shelves or at the pub, dividing communities, bringing anxiety and fear. That's why how we operate on the world stage matters so much. Mr. Speaker, we all remember the mistakes of Iraq, and we have learned those lessons. Any UK actions must always have a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. I say again, we were not involved in the initial strikes on Iran, and we will not join offensive action now. But in the face of Iran's barrage of missiles and drones, we will protect our people in the region and support the collective self-defense of our allies, because that is our duty to the British people. It is the best way to eliminate the urgent threat, to prevent the situation spiraling further, and support return to diplomacy. It is the best way to protect British interests and British lives. That is what this government is doing. And I commend this statement to the House.
So we were just listening in there to that latest statement from British Prime Minister Keir Starmer involving these escalating strikes in the Middle East. We are quickly approaching the top of the new hour. It is about to be 3 a.m. here on the East Coast in the U.S. It's about to be midnight over on the West Coast. If you are just joining us here, my name is Karala Hana, and we are continuing our coverage following all of the developments, details, and any impacts globally given the strikes and escalating fights in the Middle East. I want to bring us out to some images that we do have. This one coming out of Beirut in Lebanon, as we brought to you throughout the day today, the breaking news that Israel has announced that it is simultaneously striking targets in Beirut and also Tehran. Now, a lot of questions are being brought up by people who are following this very closely, one of them having to do with how this is going to be affecting oil prices and the prices of gas. So I want to turn now to that topic, bringing onto the program Will Harris. He is a senior analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Will, good morning. Good to have you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I want to start with the basics here. When we see conflicts like this, how quickly do retail gasoline and diesel prices actually react with geopolitical fighting?
Well, shortly, we've already seen the impact at the pump for Americans. We've already seen gasoline futures pop by over 10%, and this is just in this initial risk premium phase. We're currently looking at how the rest of this escalation in the Middle East is going to unfold. It really depends on the scale, the nature of the retaliation from the Iranians, and really the duration of the disruption through the Strait of Hormuz. This is where 20% of the world's crude supplies transits, and so obviously this is a very severe consequences for the global oil markets and for the American consumer.
want to take us closer to the live images that we still have over in Beirut, Lebanon. You mentioned a few points there during this first answer that I want to touch on and go even deeper on. First, let's start with this though. In the past few trading sessions, how have oil markets reacted to these latest strikes involving Israel, Iran, and Hezbollah? What is truly driving the price volatility at the moment?
So we've seen global oil benchmarks, so that's both Brent oil and US WTI. These have risen by roughly 10% or more since the initial strikes on the weekend. Now, it'll depend on any further disruption. We think that if this extends for another week or so, with very few tankers transiting that Strait of Hormuz, we could see prices continue to climb into the 80s, 90s, and we think this could translate into gasoline prices approaching that $4 a gallon marker.
I think to go off of that, just to give a sense and a little more context to our viewers, right before this, what was the average price for that barrel? Just so that people know how it's shifted and how quickly it has.
Yeah, so the average price for a global benchmark oil barrel was roughly $70 a barrel. We are currently above 80 at the moment. So this is a pretty significant increase, particularly compared to historical standards. Now, but we think that there is significant upside potential depending on the scale of further disruption. This is only the initial risk phase. There's continued operations and production of oil within the Persian Gulf, but there's almost no tanker vessel traffic transiting that Strait of Hormuz, exporting that 20% of crude oil from the region. So this is the most important crude oil producing region in the world, and we will be watching that marine tanker traffic very closely over the next week, 2 weeks, because if that supply cannot get out, we're going to see much higher oil prices. Over $100 a barrel of oil is certainly possible if there's no oil coming out of the strait. That would equal $4, maybe even approaching $5 a gallon for the U.S. driver.
And we're going to be talking about the significance of the Strait of Hormuz a little more in depth in just a moment. First, though, I want to take us out to a social media post. Fox News Politics saying this: gas price surge. Analysts warn consumers could see 25 to 50 cent jumps at the pump as Middle East tensions threaten the Strait of Hormuz, a critical corridor for 20% of global oil supply. All right, so let's just transition here to the strait and just let our audience know and our viewers know, really hone in on the importance of that. So as the escalation here, it continues, and if we're to threaten more shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, how significant would that be for global supply flows and tanker rates? I mean, you touched on it previously just a little bit here, but if you can bring it here to perspective, when we talk about how we look at how important this strait is on a map, I mean, what really is going to be that big hit?
So the Persian Gulf is 20% of global oil supply, and while a lot of countries around the world have inventories of oil that they can begin to draw down, within a week, 2 weeks maximum, there will be a significant premium being placed on non-Persian Gulf oil. This is where oil prices could really start to spiral. With being such a large share of global oil demand, or serving global oil demand, this supply needs to get out into the open ocean as soon as possible, or we will start to see large increases in oil pricing. We've already seen that 10% bump. You very clearly noted that we've already seen a 25 to 50 cent change at the gas pump in the U.S. This is just the initial phase. So this could continue to go higher if this disruption persists. We are seeing these vessels are not transiting the strait. Marine insurance companies have also pulled their insurance policies. So, but we're still seeing this suspension. And the resumption of traffic around the Strait of Hormuz will be the critical component for this. And also, we will be looking for any potential Iranian drone strikes or military retaliation on energy infrastructure. We have seen that yesterday on the gas side. We saw drone strikes at the largest LNG facility in the world in Qatar, and they have fully suspended operations as a result. We saw natural gas prices spike on the back of that. And we think that the similar effect and impact could happen if some regional oil infrastructure is targeted by the Iranians.
You know, a lot of this developed so quickly here. Going back to some of these OPEC producers, especially focusing on Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they're watching out for this on high alert. Travel advisories have already been issued. So there are disruptions there. But Saudi Arabia, the UAE, are they in a position right now to offset any potential supply disruptions? And how long are they able to offset those disruptions?
So Saudi Arabia and the UAE are the top of the OPEC group. OPEC has just announced this weekend that they intend on increasing production by 200,000 barrels a day in April. The big key here is that these countries are almost fully reliant on that strait to increase production, to access global markets. So just the announcement of an extra 200,000 barrels a day is really not only a sort of drop in the ocean compared to the potential 20 million barrel a day loss from the entire region. It's also reliant on getting marine traffic through the strait. There are a couple of smaller options. There's an east-west pipeline that helps circumvent marine traffic through Saudi Arabia. That's only 5 million barrels a day. So that can help partly backfill these losses. But really, when you're talking scale of production from this region, 20% of global supply, there's nothing that can replace it. Inventories will start to be whittling down, and on the back of that, we'll start to see prices rising. And I think within 3 to 4 weeks ongoing with this disruption, you'll really start to hit a crisis stage of oil supply globally.
Talking about looking ahead to this crisis stage that we could be seeing, Will, as someone who has studied this extensively and monitors all of these changes and disruptions within oil supply and how it affects people, are you able to possibly look at another scenario throughout, I don't know, the last few years that kind of would give people a sense, a real world example as to the impacts that they're going to be facing? How could it compare to this right now, the conflicts that we're seeing based off of the strikes with Iran?
Well, the only recent analog we have here is 2019, where there was some Iranian-backed militia called the Houthis in Yemen drone striked one of the largest oil facilities in the world in Saudi Arabia. This knocked out about 6 million barrels a day of capacity, very temporarily, only for a week. But we still saw oil prices spike sharply on that. So these are very, very sensitive supply and demand dynamics in the oil market. If you take out a big chunk of it, as we are looking right now, either through suspension of marine traffic or through killing the operations of the actual energy infrastructure, there's going to be a sharp reaction in the oil market. And I think for U.S. gasoline prices, the outlook is probably higher from here unless we see an immediate de-escalation of military activity between Iran, U.S., Israel, and the Arabian neighbors.
You know, a lot of national news outlets are following this story closely, the impact to the oil industry, the prices, what consumers are going to be facing. Well, is there a particular, focus within all of your analysis and everything that you're watching here that you feel has not been talked about enough that you think our viewers or anyone monitoring the situation should be aware about and should be watching out for?
Yes, so I think the one thing that is really, really key here is the duration of the disruption. It's not just a 1 week disruption can be managed. A 4-week disruption, things start to break in the system. So I think that's one area where I'd be looking at. And then quite related to that, it's what the Trump administration and Secretary Hegseth are deciding as far as operations within the region. It's going to hinge very, very clearly on on how this war progresses, whether it escalates further or de-escalates, and particularly as it relates to some of this energy infrastructure within the region. If some of that oil infrastructure gets hit, like we saw the gas infrastructure did yesterday, then we're definitely going to see major dislocations in oil supply on top of the disruptions in marine traffic, tanker traffic getting out of the strait.
Will Harris, a senior analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. We appreciate your time here joining us live now from Fox to break this down. Of course, we are watching out for all of these developments. As you said, we probably have a week, and then we'll see what happens after that. We look forward to checking in with you soon.
Thank you.
We are going to step away for a brief commercial break as we've been talking about oil prices that is top of mind for many. Following this situation, I just want to reference back one more time the social media post from Fox News Politics. Gas price surge for 20% of global oil supply. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us here at Live Now from Fox as we continue more of our coverage as to these strikes that are continuing there in the Middle East, how it's having impacts to countries and millions of people around the world. A couple of live images, that we continue to get here. This one coming out of Cyprus. It's the location where a British military base was struck by Iran just a couple of days ago. And then we also have a live look out of Beirut, Lebanon, where smoke can still be seen here in the distance. Israeli military earlier announced that it was conducting strikes simultaneously against Beirut and also Tehran. Just yesterday, if you joined us overnight or really early in the morning, we previewed the fact that members of the Trump administration, including Secretary Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, they were going to be giving an update to several lawmakers in the U.S. on those strikes against Iran. Now, we did play out some of the comments when they have.
She opened the door. It swung slowly upon its hinges, as if.
Next.
The purpose of this is to destroy that missile capability. Why does Iran want that ballistic missile capability? What they are trying to do and have been trying to do for a very long time is build conventional weapons capability as a shield where they can hide behind it. Meaning, there would come a point where they have so many conventional missiles, so many drones, and can inflict so much damage that no one can do anything about their nuclear program. That is what they were trying to do, is put themselves in a place of immunity where the damage they could inflict on the region would be so high that no one can do anything about their nuclear program or their nuclear ambitions. They are producing, by some estimates, over 100 of these missiles a month. Compare that to the 6 or 7 interceptors that could be built a month. They can build 100 of these a month, not to mention the thousands of one-way attack drones that they also have. They've been doing this for a very long time, and by the way, they've been doing it under sanction. You see the attacks they're conducting right now? They're attacking airports, they're attacking hotels, they're hitting not just military bases, they're attacking our embassies directly, they're attacking facilities that have nothing to do with war or with military, and that's a weekend Iran. That's in Iran despite years of sanction. Imagine a year from now, or a year and a half from now, the capabilities they would have to inflict damage on us. It's an unacceptable risk, especially in the hands of a regime that's run by radical clerics. The Ayatollah was a radical cleric. That entire regime is led by radical clerics who don't make geopolitical decisions. They make decisions on the basis of theology, their view of theology, which is an apocalyptic one. That has to be taken very seriously as well. So that was the purpose for what this operation is all about. That's what it's focused on. As the president said earlier today, it is on or ahead of schedule. I will defer to the Department of War to discuss the progress being made at a tactical level, but it was the right decision and an important decision for the safety and security of the world. There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen, and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life. No, first of all, let me two things I would say. Number one is, no matter what, ultimately this operation needed to happen. That's the question of why now. But this operation needed to happen because Iran in about a year or a year and a half would cross the line of immunity, meaning they would have so many short-range missiles, so many drones, that no one could do anything about it because they could hold the whole world hostage. Look at the damage they're doing now. And this is a weekend Iran. Imagine a year from now. So that had to happen. Obviously, we were aware of Israeli intentions and understood what that would mean for us, and we had to be prepared to act as a result of it. But this had to happen no matter what.
President Trump said overnight that his top choices to now run Iran were killed in the strikes. So the United States have a firm plan for how they intend to handle this power vacuum in Iran to ensure that IRGC hardliner does not take
So two things can be true. Number one is our mission and our focus is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and their ability to manufacture them, as well as the threat posed by their Navy to global shipping. That's their objective. That said, we would not mind, we would not be heartbroken, and we hope that the Iranian people can overthrow this government and establish a new future for that country. We would love for that to be possible. But the objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and of their naval capabilities.
Are you saying that there is no responsibility, no plan for the U.S. to at least play a role in whatever government comes next?
We might. We'll see how circumstances play out. But I'm telling you what the objectives of this operation are. The objectives of this operation are to destroy their ballistic missile capability and make sure they can't rebuild it, and make sure that they can't hide behind that to have a nuclear program. That's the objective of the mission. That said, abundantly clear, we would love for there to be an Iran that's not governed by radical Shia clerics. As I've said myself repeatedly for years, the leadership of that country does not reflect the people of Iran, and I think that's been pretty apparent in the protests that you've seen. If there's something we can do to help them down the road, we'd obviously be open to it, but that's not the objective. The objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capability. What now?
Regime change has not gone well for the United States for many, many decades. How do you assure the American public that things will not get worse for the next regime that comes in there to replace the
Well, we would love to see this regime be replaced. And ultimately, as the president has said, he calls... No, but let me finish my answer. As the president has said, he would love for the people of Iran to use this as an opportunity to rise up and remove these leaders. They've been wanting to remove them for a long time. We've seen successive waves of protests, and we've seen them slaughter people. Okay, but the objective of this mission is to make sure they don't have these weapons that can threaten us and our allies in the region. That's why we're doing what we're doing now. And while we would love to see a new regime, the bottom line is no matter who governs that country a year from now, they're not going to have these ballistic missiles and they're not going to have these drones to threaten us. That's the objective of this mission, is to deny them the ability to use ballistic missiles to threaten their neighbors, to threaten our bases, to threaten our presence in the region, and ultimately as a shield behind which they can do whatever they want with their nuclear weapons ambition. We were not going to let them hide behind that, and that's why this was such a critical mission to undertake now while they were at their weakest point, and not a year from now where they could inflict even more damage and perhaps already be behind that point of immunity. Right here behind, go you and then you. Yes.
They should be able to weigh in here, and there are going to be war powers resolutions voted in Congress later this week. Why not notify Congress ahead of this? And does Congress?
Well, we did. We notified Congress. I mean, we notified the Gang of Eight. We notified congressional leadership. There's no law that requires us to do that. The law says we have to notify them 48 hours after beginning hostilities. We've done that. I think the notification went today. But we did notify members of Congress in advance. But we can't notify 535 members of Congress. And, the Congress can vote on whatever they want, but there's no law that requires us to do that. And I want to say something because I see people on TV. Look, that's fine. If they want to take a war powers vote, they can do that. They've done that. They've done that a bunch of times. But people keep saying that there's no law that requires the president to have done anything with regards to this. To begin with, no presidential administration has ever accepted the War Powers Act as constitutional. Not Republican presidents, not Democratic presidents. That said, we have followed the notification of 48 hours, and we're here today. I've done more Gang of Eight briefings than I got in the 4 years that Biden was president and I was a member of the Gang of Eight. All of that said, we complied with the law 100%. And we're going to continue to comply with it. We've done the notification, and we officially to Congress, but we did notify members of Congress. We just can't notify 535 people. That's not possible. But we did the Gang of Eight twice. I briefed them last week, and then I called them the night before the operation.
Can you tell us what you know, Mr. Secretary of the Administration, about the strike on the building in Southern?
That knowledge that you have about Hezbollah helps to paint a better picture as to why we're watching some of this focus now shift to that group as well. I do want to put this up, though, some reporting that we just have into our newsroom from Trey Yingst with Fox, saying 2 big explosions just happened over Tel Aviv. And we also have this update as well, saying that missiles are now targeting areas in northern Israel. I have to ask you, as we're looking at this vantage point and a few others that we have here in our newsroom, how is Israel able to protect itself in a situation like this? We've been watching some of what we've seen with the Iron Dome. Of course, it's been fascinating to see some of these missiles being intercepted over the skyline. But truly, in a moment like this is something Israel has been prepared for, I'm sure, for several decades.
Absolutely. Israel had to cope for more than a decade with thousands of Hezbollah and Hamas missiles entering its territory and targeting its civilian centers. And with the technological know-how and the entrepreneurial spirit that I think defines Israel, they were able to develop this Iron Dome technology, which the US is now working on a version of that to defend our homeland. But the Israelis were able to deploy the Iron Dome very effectively. It has a very high rate of interception success. So most of these projectiles coming through get knocked out of the sky before they're able damage. But I don't think the Iron Dome or any missile shield is infallible. There will always be cracks, and you're seeing that now. And I think the Iranians are trying to exploit those cracks and get as many missiles as they can into Israel. They launched 200 yesterday. The sense I'm getting today is that there will have been even more. And I think they want to make sure that, if Israel is pursuing this project of regime change, then the Iranians want to ensure that the Israeli people suffer as much as possible because of that.
And we're still looking at some of these live vantage points, watching the aftermath, and we know it's not only happening there in Israel. The United Arab Emirates also said that they're closing their embassy in Iran. They announced that withdrawal of its diplomatic mission after strikes from the Islamic Republic hit the country. This announcement also comes from the Gulf countries' foreign minister, as Iranian retaliatory attacks have been targeting U.S. bases there in the Middle East and have also hit the Dubai airport and other civilian buildings, forcing the closure of the airspace and also disrupting daily life for so many that are affected by all of this. And so, Ben, as we're continuing to watch this unfold, I want to ask you about the announcement that was also made earlier today by CENTCOM, saying that 3 U.S. soldiers had lost their life in some of these attacks that have been playing out there in the Middle East. 5 others were injured. That does remind you kind of the sobering response of what the effects are of war and some of these strikes in the Middle East.
Yeah, and I would say that was one of the most heartbreaking developments of today is the death of 3 U.S. servicemen and the wounding of 5 more. We're waiting to see details from CENTCOM as to exactly how and where that occurred. But it's a reminder that, in wartime situations, even if you're not actually directly in the theater of war, death and injury are a risk. I think that, what makes this operation very different from the operations in Iraq and Afghanistan is that there is no commitment to put boots on the ground. So there will be no ground warfare, no IED attacks of the sort that we saw in Afghanistan and Iraq that wounded and injured, many hundreds of servicemen and women. But yeah, this is absolutely not risk-free. But I think the U.S. military commanders, certainly one of their top priorities is going to be minimizing the exposure of U.S. servicemen and women to lethal situations like this one.
I do want to ask you also about some of the allies there that not only the U.S. has in that region, but we did hear from the French President Emmanuel Macron saying today that the conflict has now prompted France to reinforce its military posture and its defensive support for its allies there in the Middle East. He didn't elaborate at that point, but he did note that a drone hit a hangar today at a French naval base, saying that France needs to, quote, be able to adapt our posture to the evolution of the last few hours. I think this also just points to the wider effects. We keep talking about the main 3 nations that are involved in this, the United States, Iran, and Israel, but this is also having far-reaching effects to other international countries as well.
Absolutely. And I think, you've seen, Christina, a very interesting shift in European countries over the last 24 hours. Right until the eve of this operation, they were very reticent about giving their blessing to it. Yesterday, you were among many channels that broadcast the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, talking about the need to prevent escalation and to get to a peaceful solution as quickly as possible. But the UK is also now deploying the Royal Air Force in the region. And I think, in some ways, because of the successes so far in this operation inside Iran, decimating the leadership, targeting the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Intelligence, targeting as well the headquarters of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. I think, European countries have no choice but to follow now events on the ground and adjust their positions accordingly. So I think it's encouraging that Macron is taking this position. And I think, again, the Europeans who are scared of the Iranian regime, and they don't like the Iranian regime, and the Iranian regime possesses missiles that could actually hit European territory. Iran has carried out several terrorist attacks in European countries, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands. So there's no love lost between them. And I think, again, Europe may well now evolve to, formally endorsing regime change as a position rather than seeking to reform the regime from within.
And so
You introduced your buddy to DTF St. Louis. He goes on the site and he winds up dead.
I want to know more.
What's going on out here in the suburbs?
from Reuters saying that the U.S. military's Central Command says over 1,000 Iranian targets have been struck in this ongoing operation. It's interesting to see. I'm sure we'll continue to find out more information about the specifics. We do know that the FBI is also investigating right now a link between a mass shooting that happened in the overnight hours in Austin, Texas, and some of the links to the backlash from these strikes that have been happening here there in the Middle East. It's interesting to see this connection. Is that something that maybe we could have predicted, that there might be folks stepping out to make their own impact or have their own political opinion by carrying out terror events in other locations?
Absolutely predictable, because we've seen it before. There are several US-based individuals, including President Trump himself, who have been targeted, and there's credible intelligence to show this, and even trials of some of the ostensible perpetrators have taken place. So Iran does have sleeper cells in North America, in the United States, in North America more generally, in Europe, even in Australia, which, because of that, designated the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization last year. So Iran's terror tentacles, if you like, extend across the globe. And there is a very real risk that they will try to activate sleeper cells. I think we also have to be vigilant in terms of the possibility of attacks on our infrastructure and on cyber attacks. Iran has proven itself over the years to be pretty adept at using the internet as a weapon. And I think we should remember as well that Iran is closely aligned with both China and Russia. And while I don't see either China or Russia rushing to aid Iran militarily, I do think it's eminently conceivable that Russia and China, that also have a lot of experience in mounting cyber warfare and in mounting very dangerous disinformation campaigns, will come to the assistance of the Iranians on that score. So I think vigilance at local level, police forces especially, is absolutely warranted in this situation.
Ben, your expertise and sort of your breakdown of this situation has been so valuable. I appreciate you for continuing to be with us here on Live Now from Fox. I do want to ask you one last question. We're taking this live look there at Mar-a-Lago. We do know that it was reported that President Trump was there at Mar-a-Lago monitoring all of this as it unfolded there, the strikes, the conversations with several world leaders, all taking place here. But I will say, other than an 8-minute video that was released an hour or so after those attacks, we haven't heard from the president yet. When he does finally speak, what do you think will be the center core of his message?
Well, far be it from me to second guess President Trump. A very, very difficult thing to do. I think from what I have heard of him in the last 24 hours, it's clear that he's playing his cards very close to his chest. He gave an interview last night where he talked about, he sort of teased by saying, I know who's in charge in Iran now, but I'm not going to tell you who it is. He also said that he thought there were some good candidates that could take over the leadership of Iran. But it wasn't clear, was he talking about figures from within the regime, or was he talking about figures from the opposition, like Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah of Iran. So I think Trump now is juggling with, do I see regime change through, or do I pull back now and try and negotiate with a more junior thug in that regime? The example of Venezuela is quite instructive here. You might remember, it seems like ancient history now, but just last month, the US unseated the Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, but left the underlying regime intact and is now negotiating with that regime. So it may be that President Trump is tempted to do something similar here in Iran. I hope he doesn't, because that's a recipe for a Groundhog Day scenario. If we carry on doing business with this regime, if we allow this regime, which is now on life support, if we allow it to survive, I think, Christina, we're going to be having this conversation a year from now, 2 years from now.
And as you said, it is difficult to get into the mind of the president. We have to just wait and see until he speaks for himself. But then, as always, your insight is so helpful for us as we're watching all this unfold in real time. No true full answers yet, but just something we have to pay attention to. Thank you so much for joining us once again here on Live.
Good to be with you.
Are you wearing 7 layers and still freezing your man nipples? You need the new 340 GSM military grade bearskin hoodie to get comfortable in the wild. It's the ultimate 10-pocket tactical hoodie that blocks wind, repels rain, and regulates heat for incredible comfort wherever you are. It's the only winter hoodie that's built for working, fishing, hunting, camping, or conquering foreign lands. Thousands of men around the world already love wearing the bearskin hoodie instead of their regular hoodies. With over 21,000 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. Plus, now you can attach the new Heavy Storm rain jacket to the inside of the hoodie for an instant 10,000 millimeter waterproof layer that blocks the rain double time. Finally, a functional hoodie you can actually take outside and customize to make it yours. You're seeing this video because we want to offer you 60% off the bearskin hoodie with fast and free delivery from our Kentucky warehouse. And you may not see this video again, so scan the QR code on the screen with your phone camera now to reserve your order. Or you can go to bearskin60.com to claim your discount. Need more storage? Get 5 secure zip pockets outside, 2 concealed zip pockets on the inside, and 3 fleece-lined drop pockets on the inside for your valuables. So, does the bearskin hoodie actually look good on a day-to-day basis? No, it looks fantastic. With the fully adjustable design, you'll get that perfect square profile that's never too bulky or baggy, with a customized fit that's tailored to you. That's why everybody knows that guys look better in a bearskin.
That you do have on the U.S. strikes on Iran. If you'd like to still wait, you can scan that QR code, send those questions over to us here on Live Now from Fox. In the meantime, we do want to bring in our expert, and that is Ben Cohen with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a friend of the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. As always, we do appreciate it.
Great to be with you again.
Let's start with this. As the White House confirmed on Sunday, the Islamic Republic of Iran's leadership has contacted the U.S. asking for talks, and the list of potential successors to replace Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed on Saturday by an Israeli airstrike, includes his son and former advisors. So a question I think on a lot of people's minds here, Ben, is who will lead Iran? How is this regime change going to work?
Well, I think we first have to clarify whether this is regime change. And listening to what President Trump had to say earlier suggested to me that he is moving in the direction of regime change, which meaning overthrowing the regime, meaning removing the Islamic Republic as the governing authority of Iran and replacing it with something else, hopefully something more democratic and something that will encourage Iran to become an open society. And I think that there are two really key developments over this operation that inform my view. I think, firstly, for the first time since the Islamic Republic was created 47 years ago, Iran doesn't have a supreme leader. They had Ayatollah Khomeini from 1979 until 1989, and when he died, Khamenei, who was assassinated yesterday, eliminated, I should say, yesterday, very quickly took his place. And now what you're seeing as they try and find a second supreme leader is a crisis of succession. So that's the first point. The second point is to examine how Iran is fighting this war. And I think what's really significant to me is that they no longer have any friends in the region, nor do they seem to care about that. You know, last June, when Israel, and joined by the US, went to war against Iran, the vast bulk of Iranian projectiles were targeted at Israel and to a lesser extent at US interests in the Middle East. Now you're seeing missiles, barrages of missiles ricocheting across the Arab world. I think nearly every Gulf Arab country, with the exception of Oman, which played a mediating role in between the US and Iran, all those states have been struck. So this is the classic behavior of a regime that is on its last legs. And so when you start talking about succession, I think the question is, will it be a figure from within the regime, or is there somebody and some structure outside the regime that could take over here?
And then we're going to have you hang on here, but we do see the First Lady is speaking. Let's just pop over there, see if she is speaking on Iran.
In conflict. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with the Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the Secretary General, I want to thank you for your leadership in organizing today's discussion. This debate comes at a moment of exceptional relevance. Today,
all right, then. Thank you for hanging on. We just wanted to dip in there to see if the First Lady was going to touch on Iran. It does appear that she is not. So let's continue our conversation. We do see now that Hezbollah has become involved, and Hezbollah said in a statement that the strikes were carried in retaliation for the killing of Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and for repeated Israeli aggressions. But what about other Iranian proxies? When we talk about the Houthi rebels, do you think that we could see them getting involved here as well?
Yes, I do, and I think that the Houthis can play a key role, and they have been over the last couple of days in shutting down the Straits of Hormuz. That is a crucial stretch of waterway in the Persian Gulf. Something like 20% of the world's oil supplies travels through the Straits of Hormuz. And so I think what Iran will have here will be to make this war as economically painful as they can for the rest of the world. We've already seen a rise in oil prices, and at the same time that they're creating conditions in the Strait of Hormuz that will prevent ships from carrying oil getting through, they're also targeting energy infrastructure in the region around them. You know, oil refinery in Saudi Arabia was struck today. Some of Qatar's liquefied natural gas assets were also struck. So it's very clear that there's a strong energy dimension to this. And given that the oil and energy resources are spread around the region, it makes sense that these proxies would get involved in helping their paymasters in Tehran.
Ben, we always ask our viewers to write in questions here. We wanted to get a couple answered here with you live on air. Thank you to our viewers who have written in. And this question, Ben, coming up quite a lot for us here. People are concerned, how vulnerable is the U.S. to retaliatory cyber attacks targeting power grids, financial systems, water systems? What should people really be looking out for?
I think that the US is always vulnerable to cyber attacks, and not just from Iran. You know, we've seen this, Russia and China in particular engaging in trying to engage in systemic degradation through cyber attacks. So I think that this is a pertinent concern with Iran as well, as is the issue of sleeper cells who could potentially carry out terrorist attacks. But I think that we have a robust defense right now of our cyber infrastructure. And I think that any attack would probably have localized effects. In other words, I don't see, the entire grid across the United States being shut down. I don't see multiple airports going down. But I do think in terms of electricity supplies, air traffic control, banking security, identity security, an extra layer of vigilance is certainly needed here.
We had seen President Trump saying to Iran that they had a 10 to 15 day window there to reach that deal, and we had been seeing these talks happening, not much coming out of them. This coming, though, when we thought maybe there potentially would be some more talks, leading into this question from Ashley saying, is there a possibility of a peaceful solution to all of this, or is it too late?
There's a peaceful solution as soon as the Iranian regime declares its surrender and waves a white flag. I think, looking at this question in historical context, it's important to remember that for the last 25 years, basically since the awareness that Iran had this clandestine nuclear program, since that was exposed, and we're going back to 2003 with that, there have been successive attempts to use diplomacy and persuasion to bring about a peaceful solution. Everyone might remember that 10 years ago, we actually signed a nuclear deal with Iran that allowed them to continue enriching uranium. Many people at that time, including myself, were very critical of that deal. And of course, that deal unraveled. President Trump, back in, I think it was 2018, decided that it was not a good deal and pulled the US out. But it had already been unraveling before that time, because Iran was never really willing to cooperate with its own commitments under that deal, and particularly by allowing international inspectors into its nuclear facilities to ensure that everything was as it was supposed to be. That never happened. And so I think because Iran has rejected time after time every effort to make a peaceful solution workable by cooperating, I think that's how we got to this point. So I think, yes, it certainly looks as though this war will continue. President Trump talking, 4 to 5 weeks. The Defense Secretary talking today about, it'll take, essentially saying it'll take as long as it takes. So I think we are now past the point of any kind of peaceful solution as long as this regime remains in power.
At GovX.com, service wears many uniforms. Military, first responders, government workers. Your service should be rewarded. Unlock special savings at GovX.com on over 2,000 top brands. Join for free today at GovX.com.
Dreaming of the perfect family trip?
Who are you?
Honey, Priceline's AI travel assistant.
How about Eco Resort, free breakfast, zip line?
Done.
To remind you that 60% of sales on Amazon come from independent sellers, Jess from Planetary Design will pour 60 cups of coffee for 60 adventurers.
Lost count.
Start small business on Amazon.
Going off of what you just said, what we heard from President Trump, they're expecting this to last quite a bit of time. There is concern over the weapons that Iran does have. This question from Scott saying, can we expect Iran to run out of rockets or drones anytime
can. I mean, again, a lot of the statistics, you know, war always produces this rush of information. So I want to just stress that a lot of these statistics, in my view, are tentative. But I have seen some reports that Iran is down to 2,500 missiles, and if you look at the fact that the number of attacks daily since the war started, you know, we're talking three figures. It won't take a long time for that supply of missiles to run down. I think the other interesting thing that I saw today is that, in fact, while Israel has been hit pretty heavily over the last 3 days, on each day of this war, the number of missiles hitting Israel has gone down. Now, I think the Iranians would like us to think that they have some secret weapon up their sleeves. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has warned a few times over the last 72 hours, you know, get ready because we're about to unleash something big. And so far that hasn't happened. And I think if you look at a combination of factors, the fact that we went to war last June for 12 days, not only did we do significant damage to the nuclear facilities at that time, we also attacked a lot of the ballistic missile batteries, and we attacked many of the Iranian military and police and repression facilities. So they were already very bruised coming into this war. And what we're seeing now, particularly today, is the Israeli Air Force striking in Tehran at the institutions of repression, the Basij paramilitary, which has engaged in a reign of terror against Iran citizens. That's just one of many repression targets that the Americans and the Israelis have zoomed in on today.
I wanted to circle back to Hezbollah because one of those things we have learned today here is Israel saying it has killed the head of Hezbollah's intelligence unit. From an intelligence perspective, how significant is that loss for Hezbollah?
I think it's extremely significant, and I think it comes off the back of 2 years of Hezbollah being absolutely pummeled. You know, back in 2024, Israel succeeded in taking out probably the most charismatic of the leaders of Iran's terror proxies, Hassan Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah. His replacement, Naim Qassem, doesn't really have the same kind of clout and credibility that Nasrallah does. So Hezbollah has already been weakened in terms of the fact that Israel keeps killing its leaders. And again, your viewers might remember that also in 2024, Israel unleashed this kind of spectacular operation whereby pages that were being carried by Hezbollah operatives exploded in rockets, and they were able to essentially neutralize thousands of Hezbollah fighters through that method. That doesn't mean that the Hezbollah threat is over. The fact that Israel is having to respond to this today is proof of that. They still do have a significant number of missiles, but I don't think they are really any match for the IDF. And that is why, Christy, I think that the Lebanese government is extremely nervous, and the Lebanese government is trying to rein in Hezbollah because they don't want to risk an escalation in Israeli attacks on their territory.
But if we circle back to the viewer questions here, I do want to preface this one by saying we did hear from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth on this a little bit earlier today, and we'll be playing this comments to viewers here in just a short amount of time. But the question posed to you is there a chance the United States ends up with boots on the ground in Iran?
I think there is a chance of that, but I think it's very remote right now. I know that the president said earlier that he wasn't willing to rule that out. I think that would take this operation into very different territory in terms of our domestic politics here. There is understandably a lot of reticence and a lot of caution among Americans, remembering the wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan and the casualties that U.S. servicemen and women sustained there. There's an understandable fear of that being repeated. I think, however, the difference between Iran and those situations is that in Iran, you have a very sizable body of a population that is well disposed to the United States. You know, it was very striking to me on Saturday. Minutes after the news came out that Khamenei had been eliminated, you saw Iranians in Tehran and several other cities rushing into the streets, cheering, honking car horns. I can't remember a war where I've seen the citizens of the country being targeted coming out to cheer the enemy's bombs. So I think that if foreign troops were to go, American or others, were to be deployed in Iran, they might find that they're in a much more benign environment as compared with Afghanistan and Iraq. But equally, I think there would be risks there. There would be revanchist elements of the regime that would probably try to fight guerrilla warfare. There are still, significant numbers of Iranian citizens who are loyal to the Islamic Republic. So it's certainly not risk-free. And that's why I think military planners will really see that, Christy, as a last resort, putting boots on the ground.
And when we talk about this on a more global scale, we've been hearing from world leaders, one of them being British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, is sharing this post here as he said, "We are working with our long-standing friends and allies in collective self-defense. That's how we protect British interests and British lives." We also do know that Starmer says he's giving U.S. permission to use UK bases for these Iran missions. But this question here coming from one of our viewers, are other countries going to join the U.S. in taking out the regime? And if so, how would that look?
Well, I think other countries already have joined the US. I mean, Israel is playing a major part in this operation. And again, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, countries who just last week it would have seemed outlandish to believe that they would fight against Iran. President Trump again was saying in his interview earlier that they are apparently clamoring to join the fight. And I think now that they have sustained casualties, fatalities, their infrastructure has been attacked, I think they've really seen the Iranian regime up close and personal. So I do think that there is already this coalition assembled in the Middle East, with Israel as the primary member, but more and more you're seeing the Arab states becoming involved. I think more broadly, I'm not seeing any indications yet that you're a gift in the British position. I mean, when this operation launched, the British would get kind of cold shouldered it and said, look, we're not really going to participate. And I think as they've seen the momentum of this operation increase and the determination of the Americans and the Israelis to see this through, they've been forced to shift.
Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to answer all these viewer questions, and thank you to our viewers at home for writing them in. Before I let you go here, is there anything else you want to add about any of this? As I've been sharing, this has just been consistently new information coming in here. I was on air Saturday when this news broke, and up until now, we have just been getting so much information in. Is there anything about any of what we've learned in the past 24 hours that I may have missed that you'd like to touch on?
I think what I'd like to emphasize, Christy, is that it's understandable that people are nervous about war and worried about war and want a peaceful solution. And I think it's important to remember that the effort was made to get a peaceful solution. In Geneva last week, the US put 4 issues on the table: the nuclear program, the ballistic missiles program, the support for the repressive institutions, the machinery of repression in Iran that killed over 30,000 demonstrators in January, and Iran's support for the terrorist proxies we discussed: Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the Shia militias in Iraq. And Iran has not conceded on any one of those points. And I think, again, if people are questioning the logic for this war, then they need to go back a step and ask themselves, what did Iran do? What did the Iranian regime do to stave off this attack? And I think the answer is very little.
All right, Ben Cohen with the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. Always appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Christy.
And let's take you out live to Capitol Hill, because I do want to quickly recap. Back here in the U.S. Congress is about to launch a war powers debate over President Trump's authority to bomb Iran under largely unusual circumstances, which is that he has already done it, and the country is essentially already at war. At least 4 U.S. military personnel have been killed And President Trump has warned that there will likely be more. And this moment is a defining one for Congress, which alone has the authority under the U.S. Constitution to declare war. In the United States, the Congress would need to affirmatively approve wartime operations with a declaration of war or with an authorization for the use of military force to essentially approve of the actions. But this rarely happens. In fact, Congress has declared war just 5 times in the nation's history, most recently back in 1941 to enter World War II, a day after the Pearl Harbor attack. The Congress also created the War Powers Resolution during the Vietnam War era as something of a tool of last resort. Both the House and Senate have prepared War Powers resolutions for votes this week. White House officials are scheduled to brief congressional leaders and lawmakers this week as well, but the question and answer sessions will be behind closed doors. Stepping away now for a 2-minute commercial break on Live Now from Fox. You heard me mention that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth held a press conference earlier this morning. Coming up after the break, we are going to be checking in with our own Bo Pedroitz as he is going to be breaking down for us what the Secretary of War said in that press conference, playing it out for you here on Live Now from Fox as well, in case you missed it. Stay with us at 3:22 on the East Coast, 12:22 on the West Coast. We'll be right back.
You'll never worry that AAA car batteries are fresh. They go straight to market, whether it's from our AAA-approved auto repair centers, your local Napa store, or have AAA deliver where you need it. They're always fresh. Learn more at AAA.com/fresh batteries. We're born FR. Believe that if you risk everything to protect the world, someone will have your back. So behind every piece of PPE we make, you'll find fabrics that bend to your every move, comfort your granddad never dreamed of, brutal testing for any flame you face, and half a century of knowing energy inside and out. That's in our every stitch. That's what has your back.
And they did. Joining me now is 4-star General and former commander of U.S. Central Command, commander of U.S. forces in Iraq in 2003, as well as in Afghanistan, former CIA director, currently head of Mideast operations for KKR, General David Howell Petraeus, joining me. General, thank you very much for being here this morning. Let me kick it off with the tragic news of three U.S. service members killed, 5 others wounded. Your reaction?
Well, the president warned of this, I think, Maria, rightly so, that in this kind of operation, that possibility always exists, and tragically, it has manifested itself.
And of course, this operation was a military campaign, including an important intelligence campaign. What is your reaction to the United States-led campaign and taking down Ali Khamenei?
Well, this is both an extraordinary military achievement by the Israelis and the Americans. Of course, hundreds of planes on each side, and then also hundreds of cruise missiles coming out of various ships. So a really massive effort. You used that word, and it is exactly correct. But in that, clearly, a lot of this was led by intelligence, precise intelligence, and a degree of stunning arrogance on the part of the Iranians, who I assume said, well, gee, they didn't attack what they normally do in the early hours of the morning, so we have today we can get together and meet, which is how the intelligence developed that enabled the killing of the supreme leader and some dozens of others who were meeting with him, and then a number of other leaders of the various security forces of Iran, and then also going after any of the remaining air and ballistic missile defenses, then the retaliatory means, the most significant of which are the longer range missiles. And over time, I'm sure going to continue to go after other elements of the security forces, their headquarters, and the shorter range retaliatory measures as well, which can hit the bases in the Gulf and actually have hit, I think, a really foolish move by the Iranians was to hit the Arab countries in the Gulf who really had wanted to stay out of this, but now are in it because of strikes against civilian targets in their countries, the Gulf states. And now their aircraft are already flying as part of the overall defensive effort. We'll see if there is a decision
using their bases again, which they had initially denied because they had wanted to stay on the sidelines.
And how significant would that be in terms of the U.S. using the bases of our allies in the Middle East too? I mean, and it is an extraordinary issue. You're right. The fact that the Iranians push back by striking other allies in the Middle East.
Well, essentially what we've had to do is fly off carriers. We have one in the Eastern Mediterranean, one, of course, in the Arabian Sea off the southern coast of Pakistan, and then also out of Jordan, and then even some European bases. That's what's been necessary. I don't know now if in the middle of this campaign we feel comfortable to go into these bases, whether we have what's called the bed down, the munitions and all of that, and ready to go. But that could present an option to us. I think the focus right now is still on the Iranian retaliatory capabilities, and one of those is what they might do to mine the Strait of Hormuz or otherwise interfere with freedom of navigation from the Gulf. Keep in mind that about 20% of the world's crude oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis, and roughly about 20% of the liquefied natural gas as well. So that would be very, very significant. I'm sure that there will be a spike in the price of Brent crude as markets open, and perhaps likely for LNG as well. There was a ship, in fact, attacked just north of the tip of Oman that is on the outside, just outside the Strait of Hormuz. And Maersk, for example, said that it will stop transiting that strait and then also the other strait that has been interdicted by the Houthis that leads to the Suez Canal. So there'll be quite a focus on that, I'm sure, and still absolutely going after any way that they can respond, including whatever it was. We don't know yet what it was that killed our 3 soldiers and seriously wounded the others, but I'm sure that will be a focus as well.
I'd like to get your take on the capability of Iran at this point, but I also want to talk about what you just mentioned, the Strait of Hormuz, which opens up the conversation to China. And we have talked about China before, the U.S.'s #1 adversary here, and no doubt focused squarely on the continuation of a regular flow of oil to China. What's your take on Iran's capability, and then broaden out the conversation for us and the element of China and that angle?
Well, Iran still clearly has quite a capability, and keep in mind that it's not just the longer range missiles that can hit Israel, and of course had that terrible incident there, just reported a few hours ago as well. Keep in mind that during the 12-day air campaign, despite all of the comprehensive air and ballistic missile assets of the entire region, because they're all integrated, despite that, still 5 to 7% of the missiles got through. So there is going to be that kind of tragedy from time to time. And then when you come to the shorter range missiles, there's quite a large number of those as well. But I'm sure that is a focus, absolutely a focus of Israeli U.S. allies. When it comes to China, China's in a difficult position. In a way, they have a kinship with Iran, but they're also dependent on the oil that comes out of the strait. So I think they have to be very careful here. They have tried to achieve a balanced relationship with those on the west side of the Gulf and with Iran on the east side of the Gulf. I think they're really just going to stay on the sidelines. And then when it comes to Russia, they don't have anything to spare for Iran. In fact, their S-300, the supposedly sophisticated air and ballistic missile defense system they had before the 12-day war, the Israelis took down with the F-35s that we had provided to them. So I think that's where you are with, again, Iran's supporters, and where you are also with the potential impact, again, on global energy markets, noting that I don't think this will be enduring. Even if it's mined, they can generally, that can be cleared within a few weeks. It depends on the assets available. Needless to say, the mine sweeping ships, whether the UK will go in with this on this as well. They are flying offensively, according to the Prime Minister of UK yesterday.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning the UK. Great point there. But in talking about the reaction from China, you also have to mention the bold operation that the president just undertook in Venezuela as well, as a further tactic here when looking at the broader bold campaign. What are next steps? How do you think this government in Iran is formed? You've got all different, perhaps a secular government. You've got the Shia, the Sunnis, the Persian government. I mean, what role do you expect leadership to take, and how does that look in Iran post-Khomeini?
Yeah, well, in this case, there is an interim council that has been balanced. It's headed by the president, as a member of the Assembly of Experts, and another national security figure. We're not sure if they have even met. I'm sure that they are staying away from any electronic device that's very deeply underground and so forth. And we'll see if that can actually step in and provide some degree of leadership, noting that probably all of these military elements had decks of targets already provided to them and the authority to engage those targets. The real question, of course, is, will the Assembly of Experts convene rapidly in a way, a conclave that comes together and chooses the next supreme leader? Can that even happen during this kind of intense campaign? And then might there be some splintering in the security forces? The president mentioned in a social media post yesterday that there are numbers of security force elements that actually want to lay down their weapons, want to get the immunity that he has offered to them. Could someone lead that group and then also lead the population sufficiently to take down a regime which unfortunately probably still has somewhere around 1 million or so forces that it can turn out on the streets, and is very heavily armed and willing to shoot and kill its own people, as it demonstrated a few months ago in the demonstrations that took place. I think we'll find out that they killed 50, 20, or even more, 1,000, and imprisoned many, many dozens of others. So the real question is, could there be an alternative to this very hardline, ideological, clerical regime? Could some other leaders step up, and the people and those disaffected elements of the regime rally to that individual?
Right.
And I'm not sure that is quite the base case.
Okay, we'll be watching all of this. General, thank you very much for being here this morning. Former CIA Director General David Petraeus. Thank you, sir.
Hey, it's Will Kane. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. The best way to get all interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Kane podcast for full episodes right now.
Here are 3 things to consider before applying for your next credit card. Number 1, your lifestyle. You fly a lot, spend a lot at restaurants, look for cards with rewards and benefits that match your spending. Number 2, do you have high interest debt? If you do, you can think about a 0% intro APR card that could help you make progress while saving on interest. Number 3, the most important thing to figure out is which cards are more likely to get approved for. Go to Credit Karma and they'll show you your approval odds before you apply. Credit Karma makes the process of finding a credit card easy and commonplace. Thanks to Credit Karma for sponsoring this video. Check out Credit Karma to find the new card now.
There has been a tremendous renewal in religion, faith, Christianity, and belief in God. And a big part of that has to do with my great friend, Charlie Kirk, great guy. Charlie was violently murdered by an assassin and martyred, literally martyred for his beliefs. His wonderful wife, Erica, is with us tonight. Erica, please stand. Thank you, Ed. In Charlie's memory, we must all come together to reaffirm that America is one nation under God, and we must totally reject political violence of any kind.
One of the many emotional moments from last night's State of the Union address, Turning Point CEO Erica Kirk stood up as President Trump paid tribute to the late organization's late founder and her husband, Charlie Kirk. Trump credited Charlie with the religious revival movement sweeping across the country. He also described Kirk as a martyr for his faith, taking the moment to denounce political violence of any kind.
Another big moment from last evening, President Trump hammering home his crackdown on illegal immigration and putting Democrats on the spot when
I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. Let's do the the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. Isn't that a shame? You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up.
Well, some already suggesting that moment you just watched could come back to haunt them come November. What about all that? With the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who now joins me live. And sir, thank you for your time after a late night last night. You're back at it today, and appreciate you coming on. Good morning to you.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
So the New York Times, about that moment, says, stand up with one maneuver, Trump tries to box in Democrats. The president's ploy changed the energy inside the House chamber. At that point, would have been a mostly dutiful State of the Union address morphed into full-blown political theater. You and Speaker Johnson are only one of two people, in addition to the president, who have the same line of sight with his view. And when that happened, what did you see on the right side of the room?
Well, I saw a couple of things, Bill. First of all, obviously, most Democrats just stand up and laugh. And what a shame that is. What a sad commentary that is on the Democratic Party, that the idea that the American government should stand for American citizens, not illegal aliens, that should be controversial, but apparently it was to the Democrats. But I will say, Bill, something that I saw that probably most TV viewers didn't see was really the cowardice, because there were a few Democrats who sort of politely clapped. They didn't want to stand up. I guess maybe they were worried about being primaried by the far left fringe of their party, but they were all looking around. They weren't actually saying, you know what, I'm going to stand and support this because this is a common sense, obvious statement. They were all looking around for cues from their colleagues because they didn't have the courage to stand on their own. And that, more than anything, Bill, is the saddest commentary on the Democratic Party, that not only will they not stand for the idea that Americans should come first, they won't even have the courage of their convictions. They lean on the person to their left and their right rather than actually have some conviction. That is unfortunately what's true about Democrats in Washington today.
Well, it is being talked about a lot of how many Democrats chose not to go last night. Senator Fetterman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, last hour said on our program that the State of the Union address has changed forever. Have you given that much thought?
I really have. I mean, a couple of things, Bill. First of all, it was a celebration of America in a very unique way. I'd never seen a State of the Union address where you have all of these great people coming in, you know, the guy who flew the Chinook helicopter in the Venezuela mission coming in, being awarded the Medal of Honor, and then a 100-year-old Korean War veteran being awarded the Medal of Honor at the same time. You had this poor girl who was assaulted by illegal aliens who managed to survive miraculously. All of these stories, normally you hear one or two stories. It was a constant, invigorating reminder of how great our country is through the stories of these great Americans. I think that is fundamentally a difference, and I don't think that we'll ever go back. And I think the second thing, Bill, is the president used it as an opportunity to highlight the difference between congressional Republicans and congressional Democrats. You had congressional Democrats, they wouldn't stand for the idea that children shouldn't be socially transitioned without their parents' wishes. They wouldn't stand for the idea that American citizens should come first. They wouldn't stand for that innocent little girl who was assaulted by an illegal alien but managed to survive. Whatever your politics, whatever your views on immigration policy, can't we all stand and clap for an innocent young girl who shouldn't have been assaulted and was, being held by her dad? It was such a heartwarming moment. I think every American, Democrat or Republican, thought that was a great moment for our country. The only people who didn't believe that, apparently, were the congressional Democrats in that chamber. I think it shows again how broken their party is. But that revelation, I think, using the State of the Union to drive home that we really do have a radical fringe in our country that's not representative of the whole. I don't think that we'll ever see a State of the Union that doesn't drive home that point.
Okay, let's get to the issue that might clip this administration, and that's the economy. On screen now, we can show you three of the most recent polls about the economy, how about Americans are feeling about it. Everything in red. Our Fox polling disapproves at 59%, Washington Post, ABC News 57%, Wall Street Journal at 54%. It seems like you're pushing a car uphill, and you've got 9 months to turn it around. You know Democrats refuse. They are ready to vote tomorrow. Do you have enough runway to get this economy where it needs to be before November?
Well, Bill, in some ways we are pushing a car uphill because the Biden administration left us such a disaster. disaster of an economy, the highest peacetime debt in American history, skyrocketing inflation. A lot of Americans who had lost $3,000 was that how much the average American had lost in take-home pay. Now in a year, we've actually seen the average American gain about $1,200 in take-home pay. But if you're sitting at home from the perspective of the Biden administration, you are still worse off than you were when Joe Biden took over. So we are absolutely pushing that car uphill. But here's the good news, Bill. I think we're about to get over the hump. I think the tax season is around the corner. A lot of Americans, because of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, they're about to get a massive tax income refund. We've seen this massive trillions and trillions of dollars coming into our country to build new factories. Those construction jobs are starting to hit the economy. Then the manufacturing jobs, once those factories are built, will hit the economy too. So I think that we've got a lot of momentum here. But the president said this last night. We inherited a mess. Our ask to the American people is let us continue to fix this mess, make your life better. That's what the president is prioritizing, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
Seems like it is the question on behalf of many, many Americans over the next 9 months, and we'll follow that very carefully. In the meantime, you've got a new job. Here it is, the announcement last night from the president.
Officially announcing the war on fraud to be led by our great Vice President J.D. Vance. He'll get it done. And if we're able to find enough of that fraud, we will actually have a balanced budget overnight.
¿Por qué Hoggies trabaja mano a mano con las enfermeras de UCI? Ella es la razón.
In-flight service pause. Flavor clear for takeoff.
Antioch, meals that move. Grab and go. At Amazon, hourly employees earn an average of over $23 an hour. Because sometimes a little extra goes a long way. At Amazon, skills training and apprenticeships can move hourly employees into higher paying roles.
Not helpful.
Try the Allen wraps.
Not helpful.
Pain doesn't care who you are or why you hurt, but pain can be mastered if you know the way. Fight back with Tiger Balm's legendary herbal power, trusted for over 100 years. Our proven blend of camphor, menthol, and essential oils tames pain with the strength and speed of the tiger. You can rise above pain and get back to it. This is the way of the tiger.
Here are some of the allegations. California, $8 billion in suspected COVID fraud. Minnesota, 19. Massachusetts, almost 15. And Maine, $45 million in improper Medicaid payments. As you look at this, go ahead and explain it to us because we want to understand what the job is. And what do you think the number is?
Well, I don't know what the top line number, Bill, is, and I think it's unfortunate that we've never tried to take a systematic look at how much fraud there is in the federal government. How many illegal aliens are on Medicaid? We know that it's billions and billions of dollars that should go to American citizens. It's going to illegal aliens. How many fraudulent daycare centers have been set up where that money should go to American citizens to help their kids get into childcare? Instead, it's being stolen from them by illegal aliens in our country. How much have government officials actually been complicit in this fraud because some of them have gotten wealthy, or at the least, they've gotten campaign donations from the people who have gotten rich from that fraud? The story of the American economy in so many ways during the Biden administration, Bill, is that the American citizen was ripped off from people who shouldn't be here and by politicians who should have known better. And the Trump administration, the president has asked me to take a full, whole government approach to trying to understand that. And what does that mean, Bill? That means, first of all, the Department of Justice is going to be investigating and, where possible, throwing fraudsters in prison. But it's also going to mean that Scott Bessent and some of our friends at the Treasury Department, we're going to be looking at income tax records. We're going to be trying to understand how it is that the American people have been defrauded, how it is that people have used resources and programs that should go to American citizens instead have been going to fraudulent uses. There's a whole host of tools that we have that have never been used,
And the president and I talked about this a couple of months ago and said, what if we just did everything that we could to stop the fraud that's being committed against the American taxpayer? The president said, great idea, let's do it, and we're going to work on that very aggressively over the next year.
Need a quick answer. Over the next year, is that the time frame? Is that 12 months?
Well, it's going to continue beyond that, but I think that we've already discovered a lot, Bill. And really, I think the next year is where we're going to try to uncover as much as possible and run at this as much as we can. But it's not going to stop at
Right, we have big topics, too, on the line. You got 5 years of war in Ukraine. You've got Iran on the precipice of something. Stay tuned and stand by, Mr. Vice President. More on that when we come back.
After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, in particular nuclear weapons, yet they continue, starting it all over. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon.
There's the president touting his push to try and end the Iranian nuclear. It's not easy. There's a new talk scheduled for tomorrow in Geneva. I want to bring back the Vice President, J.D. Vance. Sir, thank you again for your time. Democrats have significant concerns, especially those who were briefed yesterday behind closed doors by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Here is Chuck Schumer. Had some comments yesterday and talked this way.
The bottom line is he has an obligation to lay out to the Congress and to the American people his goals. That is how foreign policy should work. When you're forced to lay out your goals, you have to meet potential criticism. I am very worried about how Donald Trump conducts foreign policy, and particularly in this area of the world.
Sir, you can address that. Iran is not easy, as you well know. What does military success look like?
Well, I have to say, I try to understand where other people are coming from, but I don't know what Chuck Schumer is even talking about. The president has been as crystal clear as he could be. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. That would be the ultimate military objective if that's the route that he chose. That is, of course,